Hey guys, tonight we drift into a world both familiar and impossibly old. A place where starlight spills over shifting continents and the breath of the earth still hums with echoes of creatures long believed extinct. You lie back in your imagination where time flows differently, where the horizon smells faintly of resin and rain, and where the shadows beneath ancient ferns move with quiet purpose. You wouldn't last long here in reality, but tonight you can explore freely, safe, unhurried, and curious. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you'd like, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. It's always fascinating to see this little constellation of quiet minds from all over the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The stars are brighter tonight, not because there are more of them, but because there's less to hide their shine. The air is cleaner, untouched by cities or satellites. You can almost hear the planet exhale. Around you, the ground breathes heat through cracks in basalt rock. This is the late Triassic, nearly 230 million years ago, and the Earth is awake in ways we've forgotten. You walk along a ridge of volcanic dust, and the world beneath feels restless. Giant cycads rise from the soil, their leaves catching the last silver gleam of moonlight. Insects the size of your hand skim the air. Somewhere far below, a reptile moves. Something halfway between lizard and dragon, small but sure-footed. It pauses, turns its head, and for an instant you see the intelligence in its stillness. It's watching the same stars you are. They called them dinosaurs later, terrible lizards, but in truth, they weren't all terrible. Many were cautious, elegant, almost tender in their own way. The first ones weren't giants yet. They were survivors of a volatile world, adapted to warmth and unpredictability. Scientists now believe the earliest dinosaurs were modest creatures, 2 meters long at most, agile, perhaps warm-blooded already. They lived in the shadows of larger predators, but carried within them the future of evolution itself. As you kneel to touch the ash beneath your hands, you notice the fine, almost feathery texture of certain impressions, a hint that scales alone didn't tell the full story. The earliest feathers may have appeared not for flight, but for insulation, a quiet rebellion against the chill of night. Imagine that. Before the sky was conquered, the feather was a blanket, a whisper of warmth against a cooling world. There's a soft rumble in the distance. The earth shifts beneath your feet. Volcanic activity was constant then, continents splitting, rivers rerouting, mountains forming and fading in lifetimes shorter than human empires. These violent changes, scientists say, didn't destroy life as much as reshape it. Every eruption, every collapse was a new test of survival. And those that adapted didn't just live, they transformed. You take a slow breath. The air smells faintly metallic, tinged with the scent of wet minerals and sulfur. A strange comfort lingers in the chaos. Here, in the heat and instability, life was inventing new rules. Reptiles learning to regulate their body temperatures, creatures balancing between cold-blooded instinct and the spark of something more. You wonder what it would feel like to exist in such a state, to be both ancient and evolving, poised on the edge of change. Nearby, a small creature scurries through the undergrowth. It's light, delicate, its skin stretched thin across its ribs. You watch as it pauses beneath a fern, raising its head toward the stars. For a heartbeat, the moment stretches. It feels aware. Not like human thought, not yet, but a kind of quiet cognition, perhaps the same awareness that led it, over millennia, toward feathers, toward warmth, toward endurance. Modern paleontologists often remind us that not all dinosaurs roared. Some may have sung, in low, throaty vibrations, much like crocodiles do now. Those sounds, lost to time, might still echo faintly in the DNA of the songbirds outside your window tonight. Imagine that. The same code that wrote the thunderous steps of sauropods now composes the melody of robins. Evolution, as it turns out, isn't about disappearance, it's about translation. You walk farther along the ridge. In the soft ash, you notice two sets of prints, one from a predator, the other from a smaller herbivore. But the lines between hunter and hunted blur here. In this time, everything feeds and is fed upon. Balance is the only constant. You think about modern ecosystems, the quiet negotiations between life forms that never meet, yet depend on one another. It's not so different, really, only slower, grander, and unfiltered. The scientific fact that anchors you here is this: dinosaurs dominated Earth for over 160 million years, nearly 800 times longer than humans have existed. Yet we often picture them as failures, as creatures erased by catastrophe. But as you look around, feeling the pulse of the ancient soil, you sense that failure isn't the right word. Extinction, after all, is just a kind of transformation we don't yet understand. You recall a lesser-known idea, that some lineages may have survived longer than fossil records suggest. There are disputed bones in Morocco, mysterious remains in Antarctica, and stories whispered by indigenous peoples of thunderbirds seen long after their supposed extinction. Science hasn't confirmed them, but the possibility lingers like a note unresolved. And as the wind picks up, swirling dust into brief luminous spirals, you realize how thin the boundary is between what is gone and what merely changed. Perhaps the stars remember differently. Perhaps from their vantage point, nothing ever truly ends, only shape, color, and form. You stand in stillness, eyes on the constellations that have barely moved in all this time. They look down on dinosaurs, and now on you, unchanged. The difference? Perspective. The watcher, not the watched. Somewhere in the dark, a faint chirp echoes, sharp, quick, unmistakably avian. You smile, because even here, millions of years too early, the first notes of the future are already being written. You awaken to a dawn that feels both alien and deeply familiar. The light falls through the haze like melted gold, diffused through the air thick with moisture and drifting pollen. You take a deep breath, and it's as if the planet itself exhales with you, alive, verdant, and impossibly young. The ground beneath your feet pulses faintly, warm with the steady rhythm of volcanic veins that lace the continents together. You sense that this is not a world at rest, but one perpetually in motion, reshaping itself with each heartbeat. You step forward into what might be the first forest worthy of the word. Ferns taller than buildings, their fronds uncoiling in slow, watchful gestures. You walk among cycads with trunks like armored columns and horsetail reeds that whisper as the wind moves through them. Here, every sound feels magnified. The slow creak of trees adjusting to gravity, the soft pad of something moving unseen, and the low hum of insects that have ruled this world far longer than vertebrates ever will. The scientific fact grounding you is this: during the Triassic and early Jurassic, Earth's temperature was higher, oxygen levels lower, and the continents still clinging together as one massive landmass, Pangaea. It's strange to imagine, isn't it? One endless continent stretching from pole to pole, where deserts met swamps, and creatures could walk from what would one day become Argentina to what would later be called Africa without ever crossing an ocean. The Earth was simpler in shape, but more extreme in mood. You move through the thick air, noticing how even the plants seem to shimmer slightly. Some paleobotanists believe early conifers emitted aromatic resins not just as protection, but to regulate temperature, like the world's first sunscreen. A curious idea that trees might have learned to defend themselves against the sun. And perhaps, as their scent drifted through the prehistoric air, it carried with it the first perfume of survival. A gentle rumble passes through the earth beneath you. The forests sway but do not break. They've done this before. They'll do it again. The continuity of adaptation, the quiet conversation between catastrophe and endurance feels endless. And somewhere among these ancient trees, small reptiles are already testing new shapes, new ways to move. You notice one now, a slender creature perched on a rock, its eyes glinting amber. Its body is covered in fine scales that almost look soft, the faintest texture of down. You lean closer, wondering whether it's just your imagination or the early whisper of feathers. Feathers before flight. It sounds backward, doesn't it? Yet scientists now agree that feathers likely evolved for reasons other than soaring. First as insulation, then for display, later for gliding, and eventually for powered flight. In this way, the feather is not an invention, but a repurposing, a quiet miracle born from need, not intention. You think about how many things in our own world began that way: technology, art, even kindness. Small adjustments that slowly rewrote everything. The air hums again, this time with something higher pitched, a kind of chirring you can't quite place. It feels rhythmic, patterned, communication maybe. The modern assumption that dinosaurs were silent is fading. Their descendants, the birds, use song to attract, warn, comfort, and claim. Why wouldn't their ancestors have done the same? You imagine an early dawn chorus rising from this forest long before the first mammal ever dreamed of music. A quirky fact drifts through your thoughts. Paleontologists recently discovered evidence of dinosaur eardrums, suggesting some could hear frequencies similar to modern birds. Their world was not one of silence, but of layered soundscapes: rustling leaves, deep calls, and the subtle hiss of air through primitive feathers. You pause, letting that soundscape fill your imagination. You can almost hear it, not chaotic, but balanced, each tone a piece of an ancient ecosystem symphony. But there's still debate, as always. Were dinosaurs truly warm-blooded like mammals and birds, or did they occupy a mysterious middle ground? Scientists call it mesothermy, a blend of both strategies. Perhaps they weren't bound by our binary at all. Perhaps they regulated heat as they pleased, changing tempo like a living instrument. You wonder what it would feel like to have that kind of control, neither constrained by the cold nor frantic with warmth, simply adaptable, fluid, at ease with change. You crouch to examine the soil. Embedded in the reddish clay is something strange, a print, small and three-toed, but distinct. The angles are sharp, the stride confident. A theropod, perhaps, an ancestor of the fearsome line that would one day produce both the T-Rex and the sparrow. There's poetry in that connection. The largest predator and the smallest songbird, bound by a shared heritage of motion, balance, and rhythm. The sun has climbed higher now, painting the horizon in copper tones. A shadow passes overhead, not a cloud, but a pterosaur, wings stretched wide like a living sail. You can see the membranes catching the light, shimmering in hues of bronze and violet. It dives briefly, catching a thermal, and for a moment you're sure it's smiling. Of course, it isn't, but its body language suggests ease, confidence, belonging. The sky, even then, belonged to creatures like this. And you, here in imagination, belong too. You walk through the living archive of change, and everything you see is an ancestor of something else. Every leaf a prototype, every breath a draft for future lungs. You realize that extinction isn't always erasure, it's transition, a migration through time rather than space. You stop near a fallen tree trunk. Fungi glow faintly at its base, phosphorescent veins pulsing through decay. It feels symbolic, life feeding on what came before, recycling memory into growth. You run your fingers through the moss, and the warmth of the wood reminds you that this too is part of the same continuum. Dinosaurs, birds, humans, all part of one conversation about persistence. A modern parallel drifts into your thoughts, how humanity too is constantly transforming. Our technology, our cities, our languages, each a kind of feather, first created for one purpose, then repurposed for another. You wonder if we are also evolving towards something unexpected, something gentler, more attuned, more patient. As the wind rises again, the forest sighs like an ocean, each branch bending in graceful agreement. You tilt your head back, following the flight of the pterosaur disappearing into the light. The boundary between past and present dissolves. Maybe dinosaurs didn't vanish at all. Maybe they simply learned new ways to be. The air cools as evening drapes itself over the horizon, tinting the forest in deep violets and fading gold. You walk slowly now, guided more by sound than sight. The soft crunch of ferns beneath your feet, the distant ripple of a swamp, the whisper of wings slicing through air thick with age. It feels like the planet itself is sighing after a long, warm day, content but still restless, alive in its own geological heartbeat. You follow a faint trail where the soil is pressed into a sequence of repeating impressions. The prints look ancient, but they're fresh, newly formed by something that passed only hours before. You crouch low, 3 long toes deep in the mud, each ending in a sharp claw that curves like a question mark. You trace the edge of one print with your finger, realizing that the mud is already drying, already preserving. You are watching a fossil form in real time. The scientific fact here is simple but awe-inspiring. Fossils don't capture moments, they capture transitions. Each one is a dialogue between life and geology, between what was alive and what remains. Paleontologists often say that fossils aren't just bones, but time made tangible. You think about that as you stand, brushing the dirt from your hands. Somewhere millions of years in the future, someone might find these exact prints and wonder what left them. Above you, the sky glows with a diffuse orange light, the last flare before night claims the Triassic world. A group of small dinosaurs, no larger than turkeys, move across an open clearing. Their bodies glint faintly, iridescent under the fading sun. You notice something remarkable. Thin, filament-like structures trailing along their arms and tails. Not full feathers, not yet, but more than scales. Proto-feathers, scientists call them, a bridge between skin and plumage. They shimmer like threads of copper. You remember reading about this discovery once. Fossils found in Liaoning, China, showing that many small theropods were feathered long before true birds emerged. Even species that could never fly carried these adornments, suggesting that feathers weren't just for flight at all, but for warmth, display, even communication. Some paleontologists think bright plumage might have played a role in social signaling, just like the colors of modern birds. In this light, the forest becomes a silent theater of gestures, flashes, and dances. One of the creatures, slender, graceful, lifts its head toward the sky. Its eyes catch the last shimmer of daylight, and for a moment you see curiosity there. Not fear, not instinct alone. A kind of awareness, perhaps primitive, perhaps profound. It turns its head toward another of its kind, and they move together, almost in rhythm. You imagine a courtship ritual, a conversation older than language, built on motion and color rather than sound. A lesser-known tidbit drifts into your thoughts. Some fossils preserve not just shape, but pigment. In 2010, scientists reconstructed the colors of ancient feathers using microscopic structures called melanosomes, the same structures that give birds their hues today. A small dinosaur known as Anchiornis was revealed to have black and white feathers with a crimson crest. You picture it now, flashing through the twilight, a splash of red in a muted world. The debate lingers, though. What truly drove these early creatures to develop feathers in the first place? Was it survival, beauty, or something in between? Did the pressure of changing climates sculpt their forms, or did evolution simply stumble upon elegance by accident? You realize how much of science is still a story of wonder. Structured, yes, but filled with mystery. You step forward, and the forest opens into a vast, shallow plain. Mist rolls low across the ground, glowing silver in the moonlight. In the distance, a river gleams like liquid glass, winding endlessly toward a horizon you cannot see. The sound of insects grows louder, blending into something almost musical. You can sense the pulse of life in every direction, ancient yet oddly tender. You recall something a modern paleontologist once said in a late-night interview. The more we learn about dinosaurs, the less monstrous they become. That line stays with you. These creatures weren't villains of some prehistoric drama. They were caretakers of continuity, part of the same fragile balance that still defines our world. You sit beside a stone, its surface smooth, marked with faint, swirling patterns. They look deliberate, but they're not carvings. They're sedimentary traces, fossilized ripples from an ancient lake. It's humbling to think that even the water once left its mark here. Everything, rock, wind, bone, wants to remember. The night deepens. Stars pierce through the mist, reflected in the slow-moving river. You look up and wonder, did the dinosaurs see these same constellations? Astronomers tell us that while the stars themselves are eternal, their positions shift slowly over time, a cosmic drift called precession. The skies of the Jurassic would have looked different from ours, but perhaps not so different that the creatures below couldn't feel their quiet pull. You trace a memory from earlier, the small creature with feathers shimmering in dusk. You imagine it leaping after a moth, stretching its forelimbs wider than necessary. Perhaps this was how flight began, not as intention, but as accident, as play. A childlike gesture repeated across generations until one day the air gave way. There's something deeply human in that thought, the idea that great revolutions begin as small curiosities. The first feather, the first spark, the first note of song. You smile, realizing that perhaps the universe loves experimentation more than perfection. A breeze stirs, cool and deliberate. The proto-feathered creatures retreat into the underbrush, their shapes melting into shadow. You follow the sound of running water until you reach the riverbank. The current flows gently, carrying fragments of leaves and tiny bones downstream. You crouch to watch them spin in the moonlight. Somewhere, eons from now, these bones might become fossils too, stories waiting to be read. You think about all that's still hidden, buried deep beneath layers of rock, fossils that haven't yet light, bones that will outlive our species, our languages, our entire memory. There's peace in that permanence, a reassurance that the story continues even when no one is left to tell it. You close your eyes. The sound of the river blends with the soft calls of unseen creatures. Time feels less like a line now, more like a circle, folding inward and outward. The dinosaurs aren't gone. They're here, in every feather, every chirp, every breath you take. You breathe deeply, letting the air fill your lungs, ancient and new, all at once. The forest sighs with you, and the night feels infinite. The next morning rises slowly, with a pale orange glow unfurling across a horizon shrouded in mist. You stand at the edge of a marsh, its surface glassy, reflecting both the newborn sun and the ghostly silhouettes of ferns that tower above the waterline. Somewhere deep in that stillness, a ripple disturbs the calm, a subtle movement beneath the lily-like pads that drift lazily on the surface. You kneel, careful not to startle whatever ancient thing lives just out of sight. A small head breaks the surface, long snout, bright eyes, scales catching the early light like mosaic tiles. It watches you for a long moment before slipping back beneath the water with barely a sound. You're reminded of crocodiles, but this creature is leaner, more delicate. Perhaps an ancestor of both predator and prey, a design that nature would revisit again and again, refining and reimagining over eons. The scientific fact grounding this morning is simple yet profound. Evolution isn't a ladder, it's a web. Creatures diverge, reconnect, and transform, their traits weaving through generations like threads in a tapestry. The idea that dinosaurs were a single unified type is long outdated. They were a constellation of forms: hunters, grazers, swimmers, climbers, each finding a niche in the great experiment of life. You walk along the marsh's edge, the ground spongy beneath your steps. The air hums with dragonflies, their wings translucent and veined like stained glass. Some of these insects haven't changed much in 200 million years. Their ancestors, meganeurids, once had wingspans over 2 feet long, gliding effortlessly above prehistoric swamps. You imagine one passing overhead, its shadow sweeping the reeds, and you realize that even the smallest survivors of that age carry the DNA of the colossal. A glimmer catches your eye. You kneel again and find a fragment half buried in mud, a feather, faintly iridescent, preserved by moisture and time. It's small, maybe 2 inches long, but its structure is astonishing. Each barb interlocks precisely, like delicate architecture designed by patience itself. You hold it carefully, wondering who left it behind. This is the first feather, you think, or at least the idea of one. You remember the real-world discoveries from Liaoning and Siberia, where entire families of dinosaurs were found with plumage. Some with soft down for insulation, others with bold patterns that hinted at communication. The idea that feathers were late additions to evolution has long been dismissed. In truth, they were ancient innovations, an experiment that began in the shadows of the Triassic and has yet to end. You hold the feather to the light, and it gleams faintly green, like oil on water. Structural coloration, your mind supplies. It's not pigment, but physics. Light scattering through nanostructures that bend wavelengths into iridescence. The same principle gives modern hummingbirds and peacocks their radiance. It's strange to think that beauty itself might have emerged from physics, not vanity. And yet, beauty has purpose here. Some scientists theorize that these early colors weren't just random. They were signals, ways of recognizing mates or deterring rivals. Others believe they simply evolved as byproducts of survival mechanisms. You find comfort in that ambiguity. Maybe not everything in nature needs a reason beyond existence. You stand and look across the marsh. The water ripples again, this time from something larger, a long-necked creature rising, dripping silver droplets. It shakes its head, sending arcs of water through the air like crystal dust. You feel a wave of awe. This is Platosaurus, perhaps, one of the first true giants. Herbivorous, slow, peaceful. Its size alone feels impossible, yet its movements are graceful, almost considerate. A lesser-known fact comes to mind. Despite their size, many early dinosaurs were not as heavy as they appeared. Their bones were partially hollow, an adaptation that prefigured the structure of bird skeletons. This revelation changed how scientists imagined them, not as lumbering beasts, but as dynamic, efficient, built for balance and endurance. The connection between Platosaurus and a modern stork suddenly doesn't seem so far-fetched. You watch the creature wade through the shallows, every motion deliberate, unhurried. It dips its head to drink, then exhales, sending ripples across the mirrored surface. The reflection breaks, reforms. For a moment, you see 2 worlds overlapping, the ancient and the present, the reptilian and the avian. You think about how nature loves continuity. The curve of a bird's neck, the balance of its stride, the focus of its gaze, all echoes of these older forms. The more you look, the less extinct they seem. You begin to walk again, through ferns heavy with dew. The sunlight deepens, warming your shoulders. Around you, life hums, layered in invisible patterns. Every sound, the buzz of insects, the creak of tree trunks, the rhythmic beat of wings overhead, feels connected, as if following a score you can't quite read. You start to wonder if the forest itself remembers the melody. A thought surfaces quietly. Maybe extinction isn't the end of a creature, but the transformation of its memory. You picture that small feather again, drifting through time, carried by winds that shift continents. What begins as survival becomes adaptation, and what begins as adaptation becomes beauty. You pause, noticing the subtle line between sunlight and shadow along the water. The reflection of a bird flickers there, a heron perhaps, its posture timeless. Its long legs stir faint circles as it hunts for small fish. You watch it take a slow, measured step, then another. Its movement is ancient, instinctive. The same motion might have echoed through this very marsh millions of years ago, performed by something scaled, not feathered. That's the quiet debate, isn't it? The one that scientists, philosophers, and dreamers all share. Where does one species truly end and another begin? At what point does transformation become replacement? You find that you don't need an answer tonight. The beauty lies in the uncertainty. The sun climbs higher, and the mist begins to burn away. The marsh reveals its colors, deep greens, ochres, and a strange pearly blue where minerals catch the light. You take a final look at the feather before placing it gently on the surface of the water. It drifts slowly, spinning once, twice, before catching a small current and vanishing into the reeds. You watch until it disappears completely. Then breathe deeply, filling your lungs with air that feels older than thought. The feather, the river, the reptile beneath the water, they're all part of one unbroken rhythm. You turn toward the rising sun. Its warmth touches your face, and for a moment, it feels recognition.
The sun lingers longer today, pouring gold into every crevice of the land. The air feels thicker, almost syrupy, alive with drifting pollen that shimmers like dust suspended in amber. You find yourself standing on a wide plateau, overlooking a valley carved by rivers older than mountains. Below, herds move like shadows over the plain, graceful, deliberate, rhythmic. You can't hear them yet, but you can feel their presence, a quiet vibration through the soles of your feet. You begin your descent. Each step down the slope brings new textures: the crunch of sandstone, the brush of fern fronds, the faint smell of iron and clay. As you approach the valley floor, the silhouettes take form. Long-necked sauropods grazing in slow arcs, their tails sweeping gently behind them like pendulums measuring time. They move with astonishing grace for creatures so vast. Each motion feels calculated, fluid, almost musical. The scientific fact grounding this moment is both familiar and humbling. Many dinosaurs, especially sauropods, may have lived in herds, complex social structures not unlike those of elephants today. Fossilized trackways found in Texas and Argentina reveal lines of footprints moving in parallel, sometimes even in protective formations around juveniles. These weren't aimless wanderers. They were families migrating across continents that were still drifting apart. You stop to watch one smaller individual, its neck not yet fully grown, its movements uncertain, playful. It lifts its head toward the sky, inhaling deeply through nostrils placed high on its skull. You realize this is how it breathes while submerged. It's an adaptation, a remnant of the ancient amphibian heritage. Evolution reuses its designs, editing but never erasing. A faint resonant sound reaches you, low and deep, almost like the note of a cello played in another room. The valley answers in kind, as if the land itself is humming. Some paleontologists believe sauropods communicated through low-frequency calls that could travel for miles, inaudible to most human ears but felt through the ground. You close your eyes and imagine that vibration pulsing through the earth, connecting every living thing within reach. There's a peace to it, a reminder that communication need not always be loud to be profound. You think about the way whales sing through oceans, or how elephants rumble across savannas. Perhaps this low, sonorous dialogue was the original song of the planet, a deep, wordless harmony that held communities together long before language was born. A quirky fact flickers into your memory. Scientists once discovered small, smooth stones inside sauropod fossils, gastroliths, or stomach stones. They were used to grind plant material, aiding digestion in creatures too vast to chew. You picture these gentle giants swallowing handfuls of polished rocks, carrying them like secret tools inside their bellies. It's strangely poetic, an entire biome sustained by the simplest innovation imaginable, the use of earth to survive. You step closer, and one of the creatures turns its massive head toward you. Its eye is the color of amber, calm, observant. You half expect fear or aggression, but instead there's curiosity. For a moment, you're reflected in that enormous pupil, a tiny visitor in its endless gaze. It blinks once, slowly, deliberately, and lowers its head back to graze. You realize something quietly profound. This animal doesn't know it's ancient. It doesn't know it's a dinosaur, a word coined by humans millions of years later. It's just alive, in this moment, in this warmth, in this simplicity. The past, present, and future are human inventions. Life itself exists only now. The light changes as afternoon settles into evening. Shadows stretch long, blending with the amber tones of the rocks. You notice that the valley is not silent at all. There's the rhythmic pulse of insects, the faint hiss of wind moving through cycads, and now the soft flutter of wings. Small shapes dart between trees, primitive birds perhaps, or feathered cousins still uncertain of their flight. You watch one land nearby, its body not larger than your hand. It tilts its head, observing you with bright, sharp eyes. Its feathers are imperfect, patchy, uneven, but they catch the light beautifully. It hops twice, flutters its arms, and takes off again, vanishing into the golden air. This, you think, is the hinge of evolution, the moment when walking becomes gliding and gliding becomes flying. You think of it as a kind of faith. Every leap into the air before true flight must have felt hope. There's an ongoing debate in science about the origins of flight. The trees down theory suggests that gliders descended from trees, while the ground up theory argues that running dinosaurs learned to lift off. You picture both possibilities now, creatures leaping from cliffs or racing through tall grass with arms outstretched, catching accidental lift. Either way, it began with curiosity, with a defiance of gravity that changed everything. You feel the breeze shift cooler as twilight deepens. The herds begin to move again, their silhouettes blending into the dusk. They cross the shallow river slowly, water glistening around their legs like molten glass. The young ones stay near the center, protected by adults. It's the same instinct seen in elephants, in wildebeests, in geese, the instinct to protect, to nurture, to endure. You remember that some scientists found evidence of nesting grounds where sauropods returned year after year, laying eggs in the same warm sandbanks. Fossilized clutches reveal careful spacing, protection by herd. Parenthood, it seems, is far older than mammals. You walk along the edge of the water, where moonlight now ripples across the surface. The stars emerge one by one, faint but steady. Somewhere above, the faint calls of early birds echo, short, repetitive, searching. It feels like the world is tuning itself, preparing for something new. You sit on a flat stone, its surface warm from the day's sun. You imagine these valleys stretching into the future, rivers carving deeper, mountains rising and falling, continents drifting apart. And through it all, the lineage of these creatures continues, shrinking, adapting, learning to leap, to glide, to sing. You think again of that low, resonant sound that vibrated through the earth earlier. You realize you can still feel it faintly, like a heartbeat beneath the soles of your feet. Maybe it's just imagination, or maybe it's the sound of the planet remembering. You close your eyes, letting the sound merge with your breathing. The night feels vast, endless, patient. Life has changed form countless times, but its rhythm has always been the same. And as the last light slips below the horizon, you whisper to yourself, "They didn't die, they just learned new ways to live."
The night settles gently, wrapping the land in deep indigo and silver. You wake beneath the canopy of ancient trees, their silhouettes forming a cathedral above you. The air feels cooler now, carrying the scent of wet stone and pine-like resin. Somewhere in the distance, something calls, a low, tremulous sound that rises and falls like a sigh. You don't know what it is, but you can sense that it's old, older than mammals, older than most of what will come after. You rise slowly, brushing the damp earth from your hands. The stars above shimmer faintly through a gauze of mist. It's quieter now, the way early mornings sometimes are, when even the wind seems to pause and listen. You notice how the forest glows faintly in places where bioluminescent fungi cling to rotting trunks. A soft, natural light that feels almost deliberate, like a guiding lamp. As you walk, the forest opens into a glade, a shallow depression filled with ferns and small shrubs. There, among the foliage, you spot something moving. At first, you think it's a lizard, but as it steps into the moonlight, you see the telltale curve of its jaw, the fine texture of down-like filaments along its neck. It's small, no longer than your arm, but it carries itself with startling confidence. You're looking at an ancestor of both predator and songbird, something like Compsognathus or Anchiornis, an elegant compromise between worlds. The scientific anchor here is simple but thrilling. Genetic evidence confirms that birds are direct descendants of theropod dinosaurs, the same family that includes the mighty Tyrannosaurus rex. The divide between reptile and bird is not a canyon, but a slow, winding stream. Bones hollowed for lightness, feathers for warmth, brains expanding for coordination, each a step on a path that never truly broke. You crouch low, watching as the creature tilts its head, examining a beetle crawling across a leaf. Its movements are fluid, precise. Then, in a motion so quick you almost miss it, it darts forward and snaps the beetle up, swallowing it whole. It lifts its head, feathers ruffling slightly in satisfaction. The gesture feels oddly familiar. You've seen it in robins, in sparrows, in backyard birds pecking crumbs from the ground. The rhythm of life repeats, endlessly revised. You notice something curious. Its forearms are not quite wings, but not entirely arms either. There's an awkwardness to them, like an artist experimenting with a new instrument. You imagine the trial and error of evolution here, the countless generations, learning, failing, refining. Feathers that once insulated now begin to shape air, catching eddies and currents, teaching muscles the memory of flight before flight even exists. There's a quirky fact that fits this moment perfectly. Modern birds still carry tiny claws on their wings during early development, echoing their dinosaur ancestors. The hoatzin of the Amazon, for instance, has chicks with clawed fingers that help them climb before they can fly. You can almost see the echo here, the ghost of an old world living quietly inside the new. A soft breeze moves through the glade, rustling leaves, shifting shadows. The small dinosaur freezes, head raised. You follow its gaze and notice movement among the ferns, something larger this time, heavier. The smaller creature slips silently into the undergrowth, vanishing in a heartbeat. The sound of slow footsteps follows, measured, deliberate. Out from the darkness steps another figure, much larger, its hide mottled with faint patterns of green and ochre. It's not a predator, you can tell by its posture, its eyes. It moves like a grazer, alert but calm. Its long neck sways side to side as it forages among the low shrubs. You stand perfectly still, aware of how easily the illusion could break. Here's another fact. Dinosaurs, especially smaller species, likely saw the world in vibrant color. Their retinas, like those of modern birds, contained multiple cone types, allowing them to perceive ultraviolet light.
You wonder what this glade looks like to them, how the feathers glow under unseen spectra, how the ferns might shimmer with invisible hues. To them, the world is not shadow and gloom, but a tapestry of living light. You think about how evolution gifts perception selectively. You, for instance, can't sense the Earth's magnetic fields, but many birds can. You can't see ultraviolet pollen trails, but bees do. It's humbling to realize that reality itself changes depending on who's looking. Perhaps these creatures live in a richer world than ours, one painted in colors we've never dreamed. The grazer moves closer, its breath visible in the cool air. You hear the soft tearing of leaves, the crunch of stems. It's so close now you can see the texture of its skin, a mosaic of small scales interspersed with soft feather-like tufts. The transition between reptile and bird isn't sharp, it's seamless, like dawn blending into day. You stay there for a long moment, breathing with the rhythm of the forest. Every sound feels deliberate, the clicking of insects, the distant murmur of water, the occasional flutter of unseen wings. The line between then and now dissolves further. You start to realize that maybe evolution isn't something that happened, it's something still happening, even as you listen. A question rises, soft and unanswerable. If birds are the living legacy of dinosaurs, what legacy might we leave behind? What fragments of us might evolve into something entirely new, millions of years from now? Perhaps they'll inherit not our bones, but our curiosity, the one trait that seems timeless. You look up, and the stars have shifted. The moon glows faintly behind the mist, silvering the landscape. A few of the smaller dinosaurs, no, birds in the making, emerge again, emboldened by the calm. They peck softly at the ground, fluffing their proto-feathers. You watch one stretch its limbs and leap upward, catching air for the briefest moment before landing again, unharmed. It looks up, as if to say, almost. You smile, feeling that word resonate deeper than you expect. Almost. It's the heartbeat of every living thing, the eternal push toward what's next. You take one last look around the glade before turning away. The sounds of life continue behind you, a chorus of tiny heartbeats, keeping time with the turning of the earth. Somewhere in the distance, you hear wings, real, sustained wings, slicing through the night. You can't see them, but you know they're there. The sky has begun to remember its future.
Dawn filters through the mist like liquid gold, soft and deliberate, painting long rays through the canopy above you. The air is cool, damp, filled with the scent of wet bark and mineral-rich earth. You find yourself walking alongside a river, broad, slow-moving, patient as it winds through ancient terrain. It glimmers like molten bronze beneath the rising sun, each ripple catching light that seems older than memory. This is a river that has seen everything. It's been here since before the first true dinosaurs took their tentative steps. It flowed when amphibians ruled the shallows, when dragonflies were the size of hawks, when the land was still learning to breathe. And now, millions of years later, it continues, changing course, carving rock, forgetting nothing. The scientific fact grounding you here is this: some rivers on Earth, such as parts of the Nile and Finke River in Australia, are thought to trace paths nearly 100 million years old. Though continents drift and climates shift, certain geological veins persist, carrying whispers of ancient life within their sediments. You imagine this river is one of those, a vein connecting you to all that came before. You walk along its edge, the ground soft and saturated. Ferns dip their tips into the water like curious fingers. Occasionally you spot ripples, small fish-like creatures breaking the surface, their movements rhythmic and deliberate. They aren't quite fish, though. Their fins are wider, almost wing-like, their bodies flattened and elegant. These are coelacanth-like swimmers, survivors of an age that will one day call them living fossils. A quirky truth drifts into your thoughts. Coelacanths were believed extinct for 65 million years until one was discovered alive in 1938 off the coast of South Africa. A creature that vanished from the fossil record, yet continued, unchanged beneath the waves.
You look at the river again and realize that survival often hides in silence, in deep, undisturbed places. You kneel by the riverbank, letting the cool water run through your fingers. Tiny flecks of silt shimmer in the flow, mica perhaps, or ground quartz. The texture reminds you of time itself, fine, ungraspable, yet always moving. You can't hold it, you can only feel it pass through. Across the river, movement catches your eye. A group of small, feathered dinosaurs, creatures like Sinosauropteryx, drink cautiously at the water's edge. Their bodies are covered in fine filaments, orange and white in bands that almost seem decorative. They dip their narrow snouts into the current, quick and nervous, tails twitching with instinctive rhythm. You stay still, unwilling to break their fragile peace. One raises its head, eyes locking on you. It blinks, curious but unafraid, then lets out a faint chirp, a sound that could almost pass for birdsong. The sound surprises you. It feels like a bridge between epochs, a melody carried across unfathomable time. You can't help but smile at the thought that this sound, this delicate thread of life, still exists today in countless variations outside your window. The debate returns quietly. Were these creatures warm-blooded? Did they need the sun, or did their bodies generate their own heat? Evidence from bone histology suggests rapid growth rates, something cold-blooded reptiles rarely achieve. The idea that some dinosaurs were endothermic reshaped our understanding of them, not as sluggish beasts, but as dynamic, thriving organisms with high metabolisms. You think of this now, watching the small creatures move with alert precision. Their energy feels unmistakably warm, pulsing, awake. You wonder if warmth itself was the secret to their endurance, the ability to keep moving while the world cooled and changed. The river bends, narrowing between walls of red stone. You follow it, listening to the water echo through the canyon. The patterns on the rock are mesmerizing, swirls and bands that look almost like the fingerprints of the planet. You pause to trace one with your hand, and the stone is warm, as though the earth itself remembers the fires that shaped it. A faint vibration hums beneath your feet. The ground here is alive with tectonic movement, slow and steady. You recall how continents were once fused together, how their gradual drifting created new worlds and destroyed old ones. You imagine the creatures around you, unaware of plate boundaries, yet shaped entirely by them. Their migrations, their evolution, even their extinction, all dictated by the slow choreography of the planet's crust. You reach a quiet pool where the river widens, forming a still mirror. You kneel at its edge, looking into the reflection. For a moment, it feels timeless. The sky above ripples faintly in the water, and beside your reflection, another appears. A heron-shaped silhouette, but heavier, its neck thicker, its legs scaled. A prehistoric bird, perhaps an Archaeopteryx, gliding just overhead. Its wings cast delicate ripples across the pool before it disappears behind the trees. It strikes you how similar this feels to modern life. The heron and the Archaeopteryx, two expressions of the same blueprint, separated by millions of years, but united by form and purpose. You realize that maybe the river isn't the only thing carrying history forward. Maybe life itself is the current, flowing unbroken beneath the surface of time. You think of how every cell in your body carries atoms forged in ancient stars. The calcium in your bones once shimmered in the ribs of long-dead creatures. The carbon in your breath once cycled through ancient ferns. You're not visiting the past, you're made of it. You've always been part of this continuum, carried forward like sediment in an eternal stream. The sun climbs higher, brightening the water to near transparency. Through it, you can see shapes moving just below the surface. Tiny vertebrates, darting, spiraling, their scales flashing like coins. You wonder what they'll become, what their descendants might look like. Maybe something unimaginable, or maybe something as familiar as a sparrow. Evolution, after all, repeats its favorite ideas. You sit for a while, listening to the slow rhythm of the river. Its sound is meditative, steady, confident, eternal. You think about all the rivers that will come after this one, the Nile, the Amazon, the Mississippi, all carrying stories, all shaping civilizations that have yet to exist. And for a quiet moment, you realize something beautiful. Everything you know, everything you see, is a ripple from the same current. The dinosaurs didn't vanish when the water changed course. They simply learned to flow with it. You dip your hand into the cool water once more, feeling its soft, deliberate pull. It moves on, past your fingers, past the present, carrying memories downstream into forever.
The river fades behind you as the landscape opens into a vast, dry plain. The air is drier here, shimmering faintly with heat that rises in delicate waves, distorting the horizon. You walk across the cracked earth, feeling the crunch of dust beneath your feet. The ground is painted in shades of red and ochre, streaked with white salt where ancient lakes once lay. The wind carries the faint scent of iron and stone, a reminder that this world is still forming itself, restless and raw. To your left, a ridge of stone curves upward like the spine of a sleeping giant. Embedded in it are fragments, ribs, vertebrae, teeth, fossilized bones half exposed by erosion. You run your hand along one, its texture smooth, almost polished by the ages. It's warm from the sun, but beneath your fingers it feels alive, like a heartbeat hidden in stone. The scientific truth that anchors you here is that fossils are not just relics, they are the planet's autobiography. The minerals that replace organic tissue record not only the shape of life, but the chemistry of its world, its air, its temperature, even its seasons. Each fossil is a signature of a moment, the Earth's way of remembering who it once was. You pause beside a larger bone, curved and enormous, the remains of what might have been a ceratosaurus. Its horned snout and strong legs speak of predation, but there's elegance in its structure, symmetry in every line. The way evolution sculpts is both mathematical and poetic, function and grace coexisting in every detail. A small group of paleontologists in our time once described dinosaur bones as frozen choreography. You think about that phrase now, watching the shadows of clouds move across the fossils. Each creature was a dancer in its era, moving to the rhythm of survival, leaving steps etched into the rock for you to find. In the distance, you notice movement, 3 figures low to the ground, weaving between rocks. They're feathered, slender, hunting. Their tails move in perfect synchronization as they approach a herd of smaller herbivores grazing on the sparse ferns that manage to grow here. You realize you're witnessing one of evolution's first team strategies. These predators, perhaps Deinonychus or their kin, move like a single organism, patient, calculating, almost artistic in their precision. You crouch behind a boulder, watching the scene unfold. The hunters advance silently, their clawed feet pressing into the dust without sound. One distracts the herd, another circles from behind. The smallest creature, sensing danger, bolts, but the pack moves as one. It's over in moments, swift, efficient, balanced. You don't feel fear watching it. There's something almost meditative in the efficiency of it, the way the world keeps its balance through cycles of giving and taking. The idea of predator and prey feels less like cruelty and more like conversation, each shaping the other, teaching the other how to live. A strange realization dawns on you. Many of these same instincts, cooperation, awareness, patience, will echo through countless lineages, re-emerging in wolves, dolphins, and eventually humans. The blueprint for empathy and intelligence may have begun right here, in this quiet choreography on a prehistoric plane. You think of a quirky modern discovery. Certain birds, especially corvids like crows and ravens, exhibit strategic cooperation that rivals primates. They plan, share information, even deceive. Scientists have traced their brain structures back to similar patterns found in theropods, suggesting intelligence didn't begin with mammals, it evolved independently in multiple forms. You smile, imagining these small feathered predators as ancient philosophers of motion and intent.
The wind shifts, carrying a faint sound, something between a hiss and a sigh. The hunters pause, raising their heads, feathers rippling. Above, dark clouds begin to gather. The scent of ozone fills the air, heavy and sharp. The storm approaches slowly, grandly, the kind that seems to erase the line between sky and earth. You stay where you are, watching lightning arc across the horizon. It flashes over the fossil ridge, illuminating the bones in brief, ghostly white. For a moment, it feels like the past is alive again, illuminated from within. Rain begins to fall, not in drops, but in a curtain, warm and heavy. The dust transforms instantly to mud. The predators retreat to shelter beneath a fallen tree, their eyes glinting in the gloom. You stand still, letting the rain wash over you, the scent of wet earth rising around you in waves. The scientific fact that surfaces next feels both obvious and profound. Rain, over millions of years, is a sculptor. Every river, every valley, every canyon owes its existence to this endless, patient erosion. Even fossils rely on it, the slow reveal of bone from stone, the unveiling of the past one droplet at a time. You look around and realize you're standing in both destruction and creation at once. You kneel, running your hand through the muddy water, watching small rivulets carving their way through the dust. Each tiny stream merges with others, shaping new patterns in seconds. The process feels familiar. Isn't that how evolution works too? Countless small changes merging into new possibilities, new forms. The rain becomes a metaphor for transformation, for persistence disguised as impermanence. The storm passes quickly, leaving behind a shimmering calm. The predators emerge again, shaking water from their feathers. Steam rises from the ground where heat meets moisture. Everything glows faintly. Plants, stone, even the air itself, as if life is illuminated from within. You take a deep breath, tasting the metallic freshness that follows lightning. You feel grounded, but also aware of something vast and eternal moving just beyond your understanding. The dinosaurs didn't simply dominate this world, they harmonized with it. Their forms, their instincts, even their endings were part of the Earth's long rhythm. As the last drops of rain slide down your arm, you notice a single feather clinging to your sleeve, small, dark, edged with copper light. You turn it between your fingers. It's from one of the hunters, perhaps caught on the wind during the storm. It's perfect in its simplicity, balanced between delicacy and strength. You realize that this feather, like the bones behind you, is a piece of continuity. Proof that nothing truly disappears, it only changes form. You tuck it carefully into your pocket, a token from an age that never fully ended. The clouds part, revealing a band of pale blue sky. The sun returns, brighter than before, glinting on the wet landscape. Steam curls from the rocks, and the world glows faintly. Plants, stone, even the air itself, as if life is illuminated from within. You take a deep breath, tasting the metallic freshness that follows lightning. You feel grounded, but also aware of something vast and eternal moving just beyond your understanding. The dinosaurs didn't simply dominate this world, they harmonized with it. Their forms, their instincts, even their endings were part of the Earth's long rhythm. As the last drops of rain slide down your arm, you notice a single feather clinging to your sleeve, small, dark, edged with copper light. You turn it between your fingers. It's perfect in its simplicity, balanced between delicacy and strength. You think of this feather, like the bones behind you, a piece of continuity, proof that nothing truly disappears, it only changes form. The clouds part, revealing a band of pale blue sky. The sun returns, brighter than before, glinting on the wet landscape. Steam curls from the rocks, and the world smells of renewal. You begin walking again, footprints forming behind you, shallow impressions in the damp earth. They'll dry soon, then fade, but perhaps a few will linger, just long enough to become part of the story themselves. And somewhere in that same wind, another creature takes flight.
The storm leaves a hush that feels almost sacred.
Mist hangs low over the plain, weaving itself into the hollows between rocks. Every sound has softened. Even your footsteps seem reluctant to disturb the quiet. The air tastes different now, cooler, cleaner, carrying the faint scent of charred vegetation from lightning strikes across the horizon. You stand for a moment, listening to the slow rhythm of dripping water from leaves above, the quiet patter of droplets finding their way into the soil. As the light strengthens, you see what the rain has left behind. Patterns carved into the mud, small streams forming new paths, and in one shallow depression, a perfect imprint of a clawed foot. It's delicate, precise, the outline of a creature long vanished, but caught here in an accidental portrait of motion. You crouch beside it, tracing the shape with your finger. It feels recent, alive. The scientific truth grounding this morning is that fossilization often begins in moments like this. A single print, left in damp clay, covered quickly by sediment or ash, can survive longer than civilizations. Millions of years later, paleontologists will study these impressions not just to identify the creatures, but to read their behavior, speed, posture, even hesitation. The ground, it seems, remembers personality. You rise and continue forward, following a series of prints that lead toward higher ground. The landscape begins to change again. The plain gives way to layered cliffs, bands of red, ochre, and black stone stacked like the pages of a book. You can almost see time written into them, each layer a chapter, each shift in color a story of flood, drought, fire, renewal. The wind here feels older, seasoned by centuries of erosion. At the base of the cliffs, you find a small cave entrance, half hidden by trailing ferns. You step inside. The air is cooler, drier, with a faint mineral scent. The walls glisten faintly with moisture, and as your eyes adjust, you see something extraordinary. Marks, lines etched into stone by claws. Not deliberate carvings, not art, but the incidental signatures of creatures brushing past as they sought shelter from storms like the one that just passed. Each scratch, unintentional, has become a mark of persistence. You touch the wall lightly. The stone is smooth but alive with texture, like skin. You think about how every creature leaves traces, some visible, some invisible. The fossil record is only the tip of memory. Most of what lived is gone without a trace. But perhaps memory doesn't only belong to matter. Maybe it lingers in energy, in motion, in rhythm. A flicker of movement catches your eye near the mouth of the cave. You turn, expecting another small dinosaur or perhaps a primitive bird, but instead you see a dragonfly, impossibly large, hovering in the beam of light that cuts through the mist. Its wings are nearly translucent, veined like glasswork. It moves with serene precision, every motion deliberate. A curious fact drifts into your mind. In the Carboniferous period, when oxygen levels were much higher, dragonflies grew to wingspans over 2 feet wide. Although that era has long passed, their descendants still echo those ancient designs. The wings, the eyes, the fragile strength, unchanged in 300 million years. You watch it hover, a living fossil suspended between then and now. The sight of it fills you with quiet awe. The idea that something could remain so constant, even as continents move and species vanish, it's a reminder that evolution doesn't always favor change. Sometimes perfection is reached early. The dragonfly flutters away, disappearing into sunlight. You step out of the cave, blinking against the brightness. The storm has washed the world clean. The ground sparkles with quartz dust and mica, catching the light like scattered stars. You realize that what you're walking through isn't just a landscape, it's the residue of transformation. Every grain beneath your feet has been part of something greater before: mountains, shells, bones, even rain itself. You look up and see the horizon quiver. At first you think it's a mirage, but then you recognize the shape, something enormous, moving with steady rhythm. The air carries their faint rumble, the distant thunder of footsteps, too regular to be weather. You feel it before you hear it. You walk toward them, the sound growing clearer, a low, rolling percussion that feels like the Earth's pulse itself. As you crest a low ridge, the sight unfolds before you. Dozens of enormous creatures moving in gentle formation. Long necks sway like trees in the wind. Dust rises from their path, turning the light into gold. You recognize them now, Diplodocus, their silhouettes unmistakable. Graceful, immense, calm. They move together as though guided by a shared intuition, crossing the plain toward a distant water source. You can see their young among them, smaller, clumsier, but protected by the rhythm of the herd. The fact that surprises you most about these giants is their balance. Despite their size, over 25 tons in some cases, their bones were hollow, their movements efficient. They likely relied on air sacs similar to modern birds, allowing them to breathe continuously, even while moving. The same system that powers the flight of sparrows once fueled the hearts of these titans. You feel a strange comfort in that, a shared breath across epochs. A sudden gust sweeps across the plain, carrying the scent of damp soil and crushed vegetation. The herd pauses, heads lifting, nostrils flaring as they test the air. They're listening to something unseen, perhaps a predator, perhaps just a shift in the wind. But what strikes you is their awareness, how connected they seem to the landscape, to one another. A quirky observation from modern research surfaces, scientists have found that birds in large flocks adjust their movements based on the 7 nearest individuals, creating perfect synchronization. You wonder if these sauropods followed the same principle, their massive bodies moving as one through a kind of prehistoric ballet. The sun begins to sink, painting the sky in gradients of crimson and amber. The herd continues, their silhouettes merging into the horizon like living mountains. You stand still, watching them go, their forms fading slowly into twilight. The air grows cooler again. The silence that follows isn't empty, it's full, resonant. You sense the deep continuity of motion, of life moving steadily through change. The herds will move, the rivers will carve, the storms will return, and everything will keep reshaping endlessly. You look down once more at the footprint you first found, already half filled with water from the rain. The reflection inside it shows the darkening sky, stars beginning to appear. For a fleeting moment, the ancient print contains both earth and heaven. You stay there until the last light fades, the world slipping into the soft indigo of night. You breathe in the scent of rain and stone and something else, something that feels like memory. And as the stars take their places again, you understand. The ground beneath you is not still, it's dreaming.
The stars seem closer tonight, each one steady and luminous against the endless black. You sit at the edge of a shallow lake, watching the reflection of constellations shimmer across its glassy surface. The air is cool, gentle, almost unnaturally still. No city light, no wind, no hum of machinery. Just the quiet lapping of water against ancient stone. You can hear your own breathing, slow and even, matching the rhythm of the world around you. This is a different kind of silence, the kind that hums with unseen life. Somewhere in the reeds, small amphibians croak softly. Insects trill in delicate, repetitive tones. And then you notice something glinting at the shoreline. Droplets of golden resin hardened into small lumps, catching the starlight like liquid glass. You pick one up. It's light, fragile, faintly translucent. The scientific truth grounding this moment is both simple and miraculous. This golden resin, amber, is nature's most faithful archivist. Over millions of years, sap dripping from trees has captured and preserved entire ecosystems, wings, pollen, even fragments of skin. Within it, time is not destroyed but paused. Each piece is a time capsule of a vanished world, a tiny universe sealed in light. You hold the amber up to the starlight, and inside, suspended perfectly, is a small wing, delicate, veined, and iridescent. A prehistoric insect, frozen mid-flight. You feel a strange tenderness looking at it, as though you're watching a secret moment caught by accident. It was alive once, unaware of its future immortality. You roll the amber between your fingers, and it glows faintly, warm from your touch. The surface smells faintly of pine and smoke, a scent that transcends time.
You think of how something so small, tree sap, flowing without purpose, became the world's most enduring storyteller. There's a poetic symmetry in that, isn't there? The earth preserves its own whispers in gold. You remember that one of the most famous amber discoveries, a feathered dinosaur tail, perfectly preserved, was found in Myanmar in 2016. Inside, tiny feathers, still barbed and beautiful, revealed the exact pattern of early plumage. It wasn't an artist's guess, but a direct glimpse into truth. You picture it now, shimmering in your palm. The first feather, immortalized. The thought brings a question. Does preservation equal remembrance? Or does it simply trap a moment, isolating it from all that comes after? You turn the amber in your hand, watching light bend through it. Perhaps memory, like evolution, doesn't stay still. Maybe it's meant to shift, to reshape, just as living things do. A soft sound interrupts your thoughts, the flutter of wings. You glance upward, and a small shape darts across the starlit water. Another, then another. You squint, thinking at first they're bats, but their movements are too smooth, too gliding. They skim the lake's surface, catching insects that rise in silvery clouds. You realize what you're seeing, the first true fliers. Early birds, perhaps Archaeopteryx or a similar lineage. Their wings catch the faintest starlight, revealing feathers in shades of gray and amber. They're not perfect flyers yet, you can see them tilt and wobble, but the intent is there, the determination. Each glide is an echo of that first evolutionary leap, when the air became a new kind of ocean. You watch them circle, their reflections rippling across the lake. The sound of their wings is soft, rhythmic, almost like breathing. There's something sacred about it, the idea that you're witnessing the continuation of a dream born millions of years earlier. The dinosaurs didn't vanish into extinction, they rose into the sky. A quirky modern fact drifts through your mind. Many birds still bear skeletal traits identical to small theropod dinosaurs. Wishbones, air sacs, even the arrangement of toes. Some modern chickens share 60% of their bone structure with velociraptor. Scientists have even reverse-engineered bird embryos to express dormant dinosaur traits, revealing small vestigial teeth. The past is never truly gone. It's just dormant, sleeping inside DNA. You smile at the thought, watching the birds swoop lower, tracing the air with effortless grace. They land briefly on a branch overhanging the water, their silhouettes sharp against the stars. One preens its feathers methodically, each movement exact, instinctive. You wonder what it feels like to carry millions of years of refinement in your own body, to move not through learning, but through memory written in muscle. You notice the lake's surface shifting with faint rings. Tiny ripples spread outward, and beneath them you glimpse shapes. Small fish darting beneath lily-like pads, their scales flashing faint silver. Life here feels layered, intertwined. Every species, every moment depends on another. You think of how ecosystems have always been a form of conversation, the living world speaking in cycles rather than words. The night deepens. The stars shift slightly, their reflections drifting across the water. You feel the coolness of the air settle on your skin, soothing and clean. The birds take flight again, gliding low over the lake. One drops a feather. It floats downward, spinning gently before landing near your foot. You pick it up. It's soft, delicate, a pale gray at the base, darkening to near black at the tip. You hold it beside the piece of amber, and the contrast strikes you. One is a fossil of stillness, the other a fragment of motion. One remembers the past by holding it tight, the other carries it forward by continuing to move. Both, in their own way, are time travelers. The feather trembles slightly in the night breeze. You hold it against the stars and whisper, "You made it." The idea lingers, quiet but powerful. These creatures, the descendants of giants, the heirs of thunder, still live among us, not as echoes, but songs. The planet's memory isn't confined to stone and resin. It breathes in the flutter of wings, in the hush between heartbeats, in the endless adaptation of life. You close your eyes and listen. The air hums faintly, filled with layers of sound, ripples, insects, wings. You can almost hear the planet dreaming, remembering its own story through the voices of its survivors. You place the amber beside the feather on a flat rock, both catching the faint glow of starlight. One from the earth, one from the air. Two halves of the same story, still evolving, still beautiful, still alive. You lean back, resting on your hands, and look up at the night sky again. The stars seem to shimmer more brightly now, reflected endlessly in both the lake and the amber at your side. The light that reaches you tonight may have begun its journey when these creatures first walked the earth. And that thought makes you smile, because in that light, in those feathers, in that resin, you realize nothing truly ends. It just changes form and waits to be rediscovered. The first light of morning stretches across the horizon, soft and slow, tinting the mist above the lake in shades of rose and gold. The air feels gentler now, carrying a subtle warmth that touches your skin like breath. You stand at the water's edge, watching ripples spread outward in perfect circles, each one catching the dawn. It's peaceful here, so peaceful that for a moment you forget the scale of time you're walking through. The dinosaurs no longer feel distant, they feel like part of the same morning. You turn slightly, and there, pressed into the muddy bank, you notice a scattering of small impressions. They aren't footprints this time, but feather marks, soft, symmetrical patterns left behind when a creature rested briefly by the water. You crouch down, brushing away the top layer of dust. The details are extraordinary, each barbule, each ridge preserved perfectly. You can almost see the weight of the creature as it settled, the moment it paused between flight and stillness. The scientific truth grounding you here is this: feather impressions are among the rarest fossils, yet they've rewritten entire chapters of paleontology. They've shown that feathers predate birds, appearing across many species of small theropods. Some were vibrant in color, others muted, but all were complex, structures of function and grace. Feathers were not an afterthought, they were a revolution. You trace the outline of the impression gently. It feels almost alive, as if the warmth of the creature lingers faintly in the soil. Above you, faint calls echo through the mist, modern echoes of ancient voices. You tilt your head and spot a small bird perched on a reed nearby. Its chest is white, its wings a deep blue-black that flashes when it moves. It chirps once, twice, then hops to another stem. You smile softly. In that single movement, you see the same curiosity that must have guided its ancestors millions of years ago. The same instinct that pushed them to leap, glide, and one day truly fly. You think of how evolution favors persistence disguised as experimentation. Every failed glide, every awkward landing was still progress, each attempt bringing the world a step closer to sky. A lesser-known tidbit drifts into your thoughts. The first feathers may have grown in stages, simple filaments that branched and merged, forming the complex interlocking veins we see today. Scientists found that early feathers contained pigments, melanin granules, that not only colored them but strengthened their structure. Beauty and resilience, it seems, evolved hand in hand. You rise slowly, looking across the landscape as the mist begins to lift. The world glows in muted hues, greens, rusts, ochres. Every surface glistens faintly with dew, reflecting the slow dance of light. The distant calls of creatures, deep, resonant, layered, create a music that feels both ancient and familiar. You realize how sound itself is a form of inheritance. The same rhythms that once echoed through primeval forests now live in birdsong, in wails, even in human lullabies. You begin walking along the shoreline, following a path where reeds bend low. The water beside you shifts in color, from gold to emerald to silver, as the light changes. Each step feels softer, as if the earth is welcoming you deeper into its memory. Then you notice something unusual. A group of small, bird-like creatures gathered near the water, their feathers glossy and dark. They move in perfect unison, dipping their heads, pecking, pausing. It looks almost choreographed, like a ritual. Their calls intertwine, creating a delicate rhythm that seems to echo across the lake. The scientific mind in you recalls that even in modern birds, behavior often reveals deep ancestry. Ritualized movements, synchronized feeding, display dances, coordinated nesting are remnants of survival strategies millions of years old. What looks like elegance is often instinct encoded in bone and muscle. You watch them, and for a moment, it feels like time itself has learned to dance. A faint breeze stirs, and you catch the scent of vegetation, ferns, flowers, something sweet but wild. You kneel and notice a cluster of small plants by the water's edge, each bearing tiny cup-shaped blooms. These are early angiosperms, the ancestors of modern flowering plants. They appear delicate, but their arrival changed everything. Here's a quiet fact worth savoring. Flowering plants co-evolved with early birds and insects. As feathers found their brilliance, so did petals. Pollination, flight, color, all intertwined revolutions that reshaped the planet. You imagine the first bird brushing past a bloom, carrying pollen unknowingly, and in that simple act, connecting two new worlds. You pluck one of the flowers gently, turning it in your fingers. Its symmetry feels perfect, but its scent is subtle, less perfumed, more earthy. The air hums with small insects moving between blossoms. You think about how many partnerships began this way, quietly, without witnesses, each one altering the course of life forever. A question rises, soft and reflective. How many revolutions in history began without noise, without violence, just persistence and timing? The feather, the flower, even the breath, all small, silent miracles that changed the world completely. You set the flower down again, letting it rest where it grew. The lake has gone still, a mirror for the pale sky. You hear the faint rush of wings and look up just in time to see a flock of small creatures crossing the sunlit water. Their reflections ripple and stretch, becoming patterns too fluid to name. One flies lower than the rest, skimming the surface with perfect precision. You can see droplets lift from its wing like sparks. You follow it with your eyes until it disappears into the distance, leaving only a faint echo behind. You sit for a moment, letting that image settle. The gliding figure, the mirror of the lake, the world quietly shifting around it. The dinosaurs didn't vanish in fire or despair. They transformed, patiently, beautifully. And that transformation still ripples outward, even now. You close your eyes. The warmth of the sun rests lightly on your face. You can hear the steady rhythm of waves against the shore, the soft hiss of wind through reeds, and the faint hum of insects. The moment feels infinite, past and present folded neatly together. You breathe deeply, the air carrying traces of pine resin and fresh bloom. It smells like change and like home.
The day has grown warmer, the kind of warmth that settles deep into the ground and makes the air shimmer above the stones. You walk inland, following a narrow trail where the soil darkens to a deep reddish brown. The scent of wet clay lingers from last night's rain, mingled with the faint sweetness of flowering cycads. Insects hum lazily around you, their wings flickering like shards of glass in the sunlight. Each step feels slower here, more deliberate, as if the land itself wants you to move gently. Ahead lies a stretch of open terrain, a field of low shrubs and sparse trees. The quiet feels heavier, almost anticipatory. You sense that this place remembers something, a turning point perhaps. You crouch, touching the earth, feeling its subtle vibration beneath your fingers. It's not imagination. The ground itself seems to tremble, faint but rhythmic, as though echoing distant footsteps. Then you hear it, a low rumble, so deep it feels like a second heartbeat. The sound rolls through the plain, building slowly, until it becomes a constant undertone. It isn't thunder this time, it's life. On the far horizon, movement, dust rising in pale columns, shapes resolving from haze. A herd, massive and fluid, moving as one body across the open land. You step closer to the edge of a small ridge and watch, barely breathing.
The creatures are enormous, bodies thick with muscle, tails sweeping like pendulums. They walk on 4 sturdy legs, their heads low to the ground as they graze. Triceratops, perhaps, or something similar. Their frills gleam with color, patterns of ochre and green catching sunlight as they shift. Every motion seems choreographed, slow but powerful, ancient yet intentional. The scientific truth grounding you here: by the late Cretaceous, dinosaurs had diversified into an astonishing array of forms, each perfectly adapted to its environment. Triceratops and its relatives were not primitive at all, but late masterpieces of evolution, creatures fine-tuned for balance, communication, and even beauty. Recent studies suggest their elaborate horns and frills weren't just for defense, but for social signaling, like peacocks on a monumental scale. You watch as 2 adults approach each other cautiously, their heads lower, frills flaring. They lock horns, not in rage, but in ritual, a careful test of strength, an unspoken negotiation of dominance. Dust rises around them, golden in the sun. You can hear the deep scrape of bone against bone. Then a pause, a mutual retreat. There's no violence here, only respect. You realize that even in the age of giants, restraint was its own kind of intelligence. A lesser-known tidbit surfaces: scientists once found healed horn fractures in several Triceratops skulls, suggesting that these creatures sparred often, but rarely to kill. Their power was tempered by understanding. You think about how life, even in its fiercest forms, learns equilibrium. Too much aggression destroys, too little invites danger. Somewhere between the two lies balance, a lesson older than any species. You sit on the ridge, shaded by a leaning conifer, and watch the herd graze. Calves stay close to the adults, their smaller horns still smooth and blunt. Occasionally, one lets out a soft bleating call, and a parent responds instantly. The sound is low, soothing, almost musical. You can't help but wonder what language felt like before words. What communication meant when it was vibration and tone rather than sentence and syntax. The earth itself carries these low notes, vibrating softly through your palms where they touch the soil. It's as if the planet is listening, translating each frequency into meaning. A gust of wind stirs the trees, carrying with it a strange scent, sharp, metallic, like the air before lightning. You glance upward. The sun still shines, but the sky seems darker near the horizon. A shadow, faint but undeniable, moves across the light. For a moment, it feels like time itself hesitates. You remember the asteroid, how the story usually ends. A single, unimaginable impact, rewriting the script of life in an instant. But you push that thought away. It hasn't happened yet, not here. The creatures before you still live without knowledge of endings. Their rhythm continues. The planet still breathes in the long, steady cadence of continuity. Still, the scent of ozone lingers. You close your eyes, inhaling deeply. Change, you realize, always begins subtly. You look again at the herd. They've stopped grazing, heads raised, nostrils flaring. A faint tremor runs through the earth. Not a predator this time, but the world itself shifting. Volcanic activity, perhaps. The ground beneath this ancient continent is restless, reshaping itself in preparation for something new. A curious modern fact returns to you. Evidence suggests that the asteroid impact wasn't the dinosaurs' only trial. Vast volcanic eruptions, the Deccan Traps in what is now India, released carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide in staggering quantities, altering the climate for millennia. Extinction wasn't a single event, it was a slow transformation of habitability. But even through catastrophe, some species adapted, surviving long enough to evolve anew. You imagine these creatures enduring wave after wave of change, heat, ash, drought, and still continuing. Maybe that's the truest definition of life, persistence despite uncertainty. You glance toward the sky again. The faint shadow has passed. Sunlight returns, spilling across the ridge and turning the plain gold again. The herd resumes its motion as if nothing had interrupted them. The young play near a shallow pool, splashing, their reflections rippling outward. You smile, feeling something like relief. Life continues, even on the edge of endings. You pick up a piece of hardened soil, dark and heavy. When you break it apart, you see fine grains of quartz glimmering within. Microscopic fossils perhaps, remnants of plankton or spores long buried. You roll the grains between your fingers, thinking about scale. The largest creatures that ever lived and the tiniest that sustain them both tell the same story. Continuity through change. A thought surfaces gently, unbidden. What if extinction is not erasure, but migration? Not a disappearance, but a movement into another form, another rhythm, another adaptation. You look at the herd again, the way their frills catch the sun, the way their young mimic every gesture, and you realize the answer has always been visible. The dinosaurs didn't vanish, they transformed. You stay there until the shadows lengthen, until the sun dips below the ridge. The herd moves eastward, a living horizon of color and sound. Their calls fade into the distance, leaving behind the quiet hum of insects and the rustle of the evening breeze. You rise, dust clinging to your palms. The plain glows softly now, lit by the last golden thread of daylight. You stand still, listening to the hush settle in. The air is heavy with memory, and for a moment you feel as if the planet itself is holding its breath, ready for what comes next, but not afraid. You whisper softly, almost without meaning to. You'll become light one day. You'll take to the air. The wind answers, lifting a swirl of dust and pollen that dances briefly before fading into the dusk. You watch until it disappears, and then begin walking again, toward whatever new shape the night will take.
You drift into shade so deep it seems to drink the light, a cathedral of green where the ceiling is stitched from leaves and mist, and every step releases the cool scent of soil and rain. The rainforest breathes around you, slowly, steadily, its trunks beaded with drops, its vines glistening like harp strings just waiting to be plucked by wind. You move softly along a narrow path, and the air carries layered music, a liquid whistle far above, a wooden cluck near your ear, a bass note so low you feel it in your chest more than you hear it. It's as if the forest is performing a piece written across millions of years, and you've slipped into the audience between movements. A shaft of pale sunlight finds you, dusting your hands in gold. High in the canopy, a broad-winged shadow glides, silent, exact, and then vanishes into a gauze of epiphytes. You pause, listening. Somewhere, a long descending call pours like warm honey through leaves, followed by a percussive rattle that seems too deliberate to be accident. The rainforest has a reputation for color, but it is sound that rules this place. Calls that claim a branch, a mate, a morning. Clicks that map a cave. Wing beats that double as song. You remember the low ground-born rumble of the sauropods you felt beneath your feet, how the planet carried their voices. Here, the trees do it instead, conducting the present with the patience of the past. You think of a simple, anchoring fact. Birds produce their voices with a syrinx, a remarkable organ perched at the split of the windpipe that can vibrate both sides independently, allowing harmonies and trills no mammal can make. Fossils suggest this instrument emerged by the late Cretaceous. The oldest known syrinx, from Vegavis EI, whispered from a shoreline 66 million years ago. Whether non-avian dinosaurs had anything like it is still uncertain, a puzzle tucked into rock somewhere, waiting. You tilt your head, imagining Anchiornis shaping air with soft filaments or a crest of primitive feathers, finding music before names existed. Drops fall in a gentle rhythm from the canopy. You follow a bend in the trail and enter a dim hall of buttressed trunks, their roots rising like careful waves. A warm, mossy hush holds the space. Ahead, a shape the color of wet slate steps into a pool of light, a ground bird, heavy-hipped, with a casque that cuts the air like the prow of a quiet boat. It blinks, blue skin vivid at the eye, and gives a sound you feel more than hear, an infrasonic boom that vibrates along your ribs. Cassowary, your memory offers, cousin in spirit to emus and ostriches, kin to a lineage that never forgot how to stride like a dinosaur. In the softened hush, the bird tilts its head, tastes the air, and moves on, leaves parting and falling back as if nothing passed at all. A quirky tidbit floats up, playful and precise.
Deep in South American cloud forests, the club-winged manakin sings with its feathers, rubbing specialized shafts together until the air turns to violin. And in Caribbean caves, oil birds navigate by echolocation clicks in absolute darkness, composing maps from echoes like tiny cartographers of sound. In these voices, you hear apparatus and improvisation and persistence, the feather as drum, the beak as metronome, the air itself as an ancient instrument. You think of the first feather you held beside the river, how light scattered into color, how purpose followed after. Here, purpose is sound. The canopy above trembles with song. Clear notes leap like droplets from leaf to leaf, and a metallic chime rings twice, then again, as if someone tapped a glass with a spoon. You picture the syrinx at work, thin membranes trembling with exquisite control, evolution turning breath into architecture. If flight was a rewriting of gravity, voice was a rewriting of air. You close your eyes and let the calls arrange themselves. Alto whistles in the understory, bright soprano threads near the emergent crowns, a baritone boom moving along the forest floor like slow thunder. Like the herds you watched in the plain, the voices obey a nearness rule too. One bird shifting to its 6 or 7 closest neighbors, harmony without a conductor, choreography without command. You lift your palm to a trunk spackled with lichens, feeling the faint cool of bark. Tiny ants travel a vertical highway by your thumb, body to body like beads on a string. In the crook above, bromeliads cradle pools the size of teacups, whole nurseries for tadpoles and micro-worlds that never touch soil. A scientific truth arrives with the patience of rain. Tropical rainforests host most of the world's terrestrial biodiversity, vast libraries written in root, feather, and scale. In each layer, forest floor, understory, canopy, emergent, niches bloom like pages, and birds thread them together with roots as old as the rivers. As you learned by the water's edge, migration can be older than continents. Instincts, like songs, can remember the pathways that tectonic plates rearranged. A question rises to meet this music, slow and unhurried. How far back do these voices truly go? Did non-avian dinosaurs court in murmurs below hearing, or in closed-mouthed booms like doves pressed to their throats? Did they stamp rhythms into floodplains that reed stems still repeat on windy afternoons? You weigh the clues, the Vegavis syrinx, the crocodilian hiss, the cassowary's boom, yet the answer refuses to sharpen. It's a sleep-friendly mystery, content to remain aglow in fog rather than a spotlight. Not all doors in deep time open. Some are meant to hum behind leaves, soothing precisely because they don't swing wide. A rustle to your right, a flash of emerald. Then a bough flexes, and a harpy eagle settles its weight with a concentration of quiet gravity that tugs at your breath. You study the curves of its talons, scaled fulcrums, sickle-shaped and confident, echoes of recurved claws you once traced in dust. It turns its head with the slow precision you've seen in herons and imagined in Deinonychus, pupils contracting, then widening again as light shifts under cloud. The eagle's mantle lifts in a small shrug of feathers, and a soft exhale leaves its beak. Not a roar, not a screech, just the audible punctuation of being alive. Even apexes in rainforests speak in careful sentences. You move on, under aerial roots that sway like pulled threads, under flowers that burst in improbable geometry. A sungleam lands on a hummingbird, and it changes color instantly, amethyst to emerald to coal. Proof again that some brilliance is physics, not paint. Its wingbeat writes a low, continuous note, a wheel spun so fast it becomes a tone. You remember the amber you held, how a trapped wing still shimmered. You remember the feather you caught, present tense movement beside fossil stillness. Here, both meanings of memory fly at once. A drizzle begins, the kind that quiets without drowning. Each drop strikes a leaf with its own vowel, and the forest answers in consonants of creak and tap. You slow, letting your breath match the grammar. As you step across a soft log crocheted with fungi, you feel the old river in your stride, the one that taught you that continuity is flow. Birds nearby trade syllables you cannot parse, and you smile, not minding the translation gap. Perhaps understanding the gist is enough. I am here, you are there, the morning is ours. There's one more small wonder waiting in the understory, A scatter of feathers beneath a bush, no violence, only a tidy heap as if someone shed a costume at intermission. You lift one, it's barred, with a shimmer only when tipped just so. The edge is nibbled, the signature of insects reclaiming keratin into soil. Even song returns to ground eventually. You think of gastroliths riding in bellies like pocket tools, of nesting grounds visited in cycles, of the herd's low language. Every clue you've collected stacking like the colored bands in the cliff you traced earlier. The rainforest just arranges them in sound. When the drizzle fades, a last call falls through the canopy, a long descending spiral you heard once before near the lake. It lands on your shoulders like a shawl. You let it rest there. As you step forward, vines brush your arms with a softness that feels like a benediction, and a small flock lifts in unison, scribbling dark cursive across a pale patch of sky. You breathe in damp leaf and clean bark, and the quiet thrill arrives again. You are inside a choir whose first rehearsal began before feathers learned to fly. The thunder is gentler here. Thunder turned to throat, to syrinx, to breath, as if the age of giants simply translated itself into lullabies. Somewhere ahead, the light widens, and you follow it. One careful step, then the next, carrying the rainforest's music with you, the way a shell carries sea.
The forest opens as you walk, unfolding like a slow breath. The canopy thins, and sunlight spills freely for the first time in what feels like hours. You step into a clearing rimmed with tall cycads, their thick trunks patterned like scales. A low mist still drifts along the ground, curling around your legs as if reluctant to leave the safety of shade. The air smells faintly of warm sap and distant salt, the scent of the sea beyond the trees. You move quietly, your footsteps muted on the damp soil. Ahead, the land slopes gently downward into a valley framed by cliffs. You pause at the edge. The wind rises from below, cool and steady, carrying with it a whisper that feels familiar. Wings slicing air, steady and rhythmic. You follow the sound with your eyes until a shadow crosses the sun, a hawk-shaped figure circling slowly over the valley. It's not quite a bird, not yet. Its wings are broader, its tail more rigid. The creature banks, and the light catches a shimmer of bronze along its feathers, or what you think are feathers. The outline blurs between avian and reptilian, between evolution's drafts. You realize you're watching something transitional, a bridge between ground and sky, between survival and dream. The scientific truth anchoring you here is this. Fossils like Archaeopteryx, found in the limestone of Solnhofen, Germany, revealed for the first time that birds are living dinosaurs. It had feathers, a wishbone, and wings, but also teeth, a long bony tail, and claws on its fingers. Each fossil was a sentence in a larger story. That flight didn't arrive suddenly. It unfolded in stages, graceful even in its uncertainty. You watch as the creature glides lower, its movements fluid but imperfect. It catches a thermal and rises again with effort, not ease. You can almost sense its learning, the way it adjusts each tilt, each correction, as though negotiating with gravity rather than defying it. There's beauty in its imperfection, the same beauty found in every experiment nature conducts. Below, along the valley floor, movement catches your eye. A smaller creature darts between ferns, its body sleek and scaled, tail whipping behind it. It pauses, raises its head, and for a moment the two worlds, ground and air, regard each other. The one that stayed and the one that leapt. You realize how many parallel versions of life must have existed, how many paths evolution traced before choosing which to keep. A gentle reminder surfaces. Evolution isn't a ladder climbing toward progress. It's a branching river, full of tributaries that twist and rejoin, sometimes ending in quiet ponds, sometimes feeding oceans of possibility.
You imagine each species as a ripple expanding outward, some fading quickly, others reaching far enough to touch your world. A lesser-known tidbit comes to mind. The first flight feathers weren't for soaring. They were likely for display, protection, or balance. Some paleontologists believe early winged dinosaurs used them to shield their young from rain, or to signal to potential mates. Flight may have been an accident of affection, a side effect of care. You glance up again and wonder how many revolutions began that way, by trying to comfort something smaller. The wind strengthens. You hear the rustle of air bending around wings, a sound halfway between a sigh and a heartbeat. The creature banks again, lower this time. You can see its eyes, sharp, reflective, almost human in their focus. It doesn't simply react, it decides. Intelligence, you realize, is not measured in language or tools, but in awareness, the way a creature learns to read the invisible. The air around you hums faintly, filled with insects rising in thin columns of sunlight. The winged creature dives, quick and precise, and you see a flash of movement below as it captures one mid-air. A small gesture, but monumental, the moment life conquered not just the ground, but the element above it. You think about modern birds, the hawk overhead, the sparrow outside your window, the albatross tracing oceans, and how each one carries this same story in its bones. The hollow structures that lighten them, the air sacs that sustain them, the instincts that keep them balanced on invisible currents. Every flight today is a continuation of that first uncertain glide through Triassic air. A faint sound startles you, an echoing cry high and sharp. You turn and see a second flyer, smaller, with more refined feathers, joining the first. They circle each other, their movements mirroring, synchronized by some ancient logic. Their shadows dance over the valley, long and fluid, crossing the rocks like writing. You realize that what you're witnessing isn't competition, it's dialogue, airborne communication written in loops and arcs. A scientific whisper reminds you that birds see motion and ultraviolet patterns we cannot. What looks like simple flight to you might be an entire language, a choreography of glints and color shifts meant for eyes evolved to perceive it. The world they inhabit is richer than the one you see, saturated in wavelengths beyond human sight. You feel a small, reverent envy. The wind softens. The two flyers drift apart, one landing on a branch jutting from the cliff, the other gliding out of view. You remain still, letting the quiet settle again. Below, you hear the river that carved this valley murmuring unseen, a thread of sound connecting past to present. You pick up a fallen feather from the ground, broad at the base, tapering to a point. Its texture surprises you, firm, structured, yet delicate as breath. You tilt it toward the sun, and its shadow across your palm looks like a leaf, or maybe a flame. You remember holding the first feather near the marsh and realize this one feels different, not as relic, but as promise. The idea arrives softly, that maybe flight was never about escape. Maybe it was always about perspective. To rise is not to leave the world behind, but to see it whole. The sky above has deepened to blue glass. You stand there, feather in hand, breathing in air that feels newly minted. The forest behind you hums, the valley ahead glows with the warmth of late afternoon. For a moment, everything aligns. Ground, air, creature, and watcher. Evolution pauses, not in stillness, but in understanding. And then the wind shifts again. The feather slips from your fingers and catches the breeze, tumbling upward, weightless, before vanishing into the sunlit air. You watch it go, smiling. The story continues, carried by currents you'll never see.
Evening slides over the valley in soft, liquid layers. Lavender first, then gold fading to rose. The light folds itself around the rocks, warming them briefly before retreating into shadow.
You stand at the cliff's edge, the air still warm from the day, and watch as the world exhales into dusk. Far below, the river glints like a ribbon of moving glass, winding toward the horizon. You begin your descent, following a narrow path that curls along the rock face. The stone beneath your hands feels smooth, as if shaped by centuries of wind. The air cools with every step downward. By the time you reach the valley floor, the first stars have begun to appear, tiny sparks mirrored in the surface of the river. You walk alongside the water, feeling the hum of night settle around you. In the distance, the gentle croak of ancient amphibians punctuates the rhythm of insects. The world feels alive, but slower now, as though everything has agreed to whisper. You stop near a shallow pool and crouch beside it. The water is perfectly still, reflecting the moon like a silver coin. Beneath the surface, you glimpse motion, a soft flicker, the faintest shimmer of scales. You lean closer, and a small creature darts past, long, narrow, with fins like folded silk. It looks familiar, almost modern, but there's something in its movement, graceful, deliberate, that feels older. You realize it's a relative of the fish that will one day crawl onto land. Evolution, even in water, has always leaned toward the air. The scientific truth anchoring this moment is quiet but profound. The mechanics of breathing evolved long before lungs. Primitive fish developed air sacs to survive in oxygen-poor water, sacs that would later become the lungs of terrestrial creatures, and eventually the air sacs that power bird flight. You watch bubbles rise to the surface and think about how every breath, even your own, carries echoes of that ancient adaptation. You rise slowly, feeling your chest expand with each inhale. The night smells of minerals and wet stone. Somewhere above, a shadow glides silently across the moon. You recognize the silhouette now, not a primitive flyer, but something more refined, a bird, unmistakably. The way its wings curve, the way it banks effortlessly in the updraft, there's nothing tentative about it. You're watching mastery. You track its flight until it vanishes into the dark, leaving only the sound of the wind in its wake. You think of the lineage that led here, the millions of small adjustments, the silent negotiations between form and environment. You find comfort in the idea that perfection is just persistence refined over time. A small sound draws your attention back to the riverbank. You see ripples near the far edge, then the faint shimmer of eyes reflecting moonlight. Another creature steps into view, a small, sleek predator, feathered along its forearms, its gaze sharp. It moves like a cat, silent, precise. When it pauses, you see the faint rise and fall of its chest, the quick rhythm of its breath. You remember a curious modern discovery. Some dinosaurs may have had bird-like lungs, capable of continuous airflow through a system of air sacs. Unlike mammals, which breathe in and out, these creatures moved air one way, constant, efficient, endless. Their breath was more like song than cycle. You watch the small predator inhale and exhale, thinking of how that same mechanism hums in every sparrow, falcon, and crane. The wind shifts, and a new sound emerges, a deep, resonant hum from somewhere within the valley. You follow it to a series of caves etched into the cliffside. The entrances glow faintly in the moonlight, and the air around them vibrates softly. You step closer, drawn by the sound, and realize it's not geological, it's biological. The caves are alive with wings. You pause at the entrance, adjusting to the darkness inside. The ceiling moves, a colony of small bird-like creatures hanging upside down in sleep. Their bodies are delicate, their chests pulsing with slow, steady rhythm. Occasionally one stirs, spreading wings tipped with translucent membranes. They chirp softly in their dreams, a sound like wind through reeds. It occurs to you that rest is as much an inheritance as flight. The need to pause, to recover, to gather energy for the next migration. It's written into the oldest DNA. Even the mightiest creatures once folded their wings and let the night hold them. You stand quietly, not wanting to disturb them. A few feathers drift from the ceiling, spiraling down through the air. You catch one, fine, almost weightless, glowing faintly in the half-light. You think again of all the feathers you've held along this journey. The first one in the ash, the copper-tinged one after the storm, the gray one that floated over the lake. Each one different, yet all connected by the same elegant purpose: to make air tangible. You remember reading about how the structure of a feather, its barbs and barbules, interlock perfectly, creating both strength and flexibility. Nature's own engineering miracle, unchanged for over 150 million years. You turn this feather gently between your fingers, marveling at its precision. The smallest detail, the angle of a vein, the spacing of filaments, can determine the success of a flight or the melody of a song. A thought settles in your mind like a feather landing. Maybe evolution is less about improvement and more about remembering what works. Each new form isn't an invention, but a memory reshaped. You look deeper into the cave, where the colony hangs in stillness. The sound of their breathing fills the space, 1,000 soft exhalations merging into one long note. It's a lullaby the earth itself might sing. You close your eyes and listen. Outside, the night breeze continues, brushing the reeds along the riverbank, carrying the soft scent of life. The moon has climbed higher, flooding the valley with pale light. You step back out of the cave, careful not to make a sound. The air feels cooler now, touched by mist rising from the water. You look upward again, half expecting to see another shadow cross the sky. But the air is clear, wide, and waiting. You realize that even the absence of flight is a kind of presence. The pause between wing beats, the silence before dawn. You walk back toward the water, your reflection following beside you. The feather still rests in your palm, its edges catching the faintest shimmer of moonlight. You blow gently, and it lifts from your hand, caught by the smallest current of air. It drifts upward, turning slowly, a tiny moon in motion. It floats until it disappears into the dark, and you understand again what the dinosaurs became. Not lost, not gone, but this: breath, motion, resilience, song. The valley holds its breath with you. Then, softly, the wind exhales.
The wind has changed overnight. When you wake, it's cooler, steady, carrying a faint whisper of salt and distant surf. The sky is overcast but luminous, painted in the pale gray that precedes sunrise. You can hear waves before you can see them, an ancient rhythm pulsing through rock and soil, older than mountains, older than wings. You follow the sound until the forest thins and gives way to open coast. Before you stretches a shoreline that seems to stretch forever, flat and silver beneath the morning light. The sand is darker here, volcanic, and fine enough to record every footprint that touches it. The sea is calm but deliberate, its waves sliding onto the beach in long, slow breaths. The horizon feels infinite, one continuous line between water and sky. You walk barefoot along the edge where the tide laps at your feet. The water is surprisingly warm, carrying flecks of ancient minerals that glint like dusted gold. A faint mist rises where sea meets air, catching light like breath. For a moment, you feel as though you're walking through memory itself. Then you see them. Across the damp sand, a series of tracks, three-toed, evenly spaced, stretching from the dunes to the water. You crouch to study them. Each print is distinct, pressed deeply into the wet sand, the claw marks sharp. You trace one with your fingertip and realize how fresh it looks. Not the work of a storm or tide, but something alive that passed only moments ago. You lift your head, scanning the shoreline. In the distance, near a cluster of tall rocks, movement catches your eye. A figure, graceful and deliberate, stands poised in the shallows. Its body is sleek, its neck long and curved, its arms tipped with feathers that glimmer faintly. It moves slowly, with the patience of a hunter, or perhaps a philosopher, testing each step before taking it. It dips its head toward the water, then strikes. A silver fish flares in its beak before disappearing in one swift motion.
The creature tilts its head, feathers shifting in subtle patterns of blue and black. You watch it for a long time, captivated by the blend of reptilian precision and avian grace. The scientific truth grounding you here is elegant. Birds inherited not only flight, but also patience. Modern herons, cranes, and egrets share skeletal features with ancient theropods. Long legs for wading, specialized neck vertebrae for striking, and air sacs that make even stillness efficient. The balance you see before you was perfected millions of years before your species ever stood upright. A lesser-known fact drifts into your thoughts. Fossilized trackways found in what is now Korea show small, bird-like dinosaurs walking along prehistoric coastlines much like this one. Their prints, three-toed, delicate, followed the water's edge, perhaps in search of fish or insects. Some were even found in overlapping lines, suggesting flocks. The idea that companionship may have locked beside evolution feels quietly comforting. The creature before you notices your movement, though you haven't taken a step. Its head lifts, eyes locking onto yours. For a brief moment, neither of you moves. The distance between you feels thin as breath. You sense curiosity in its gaze, not fear. It studies you the way you study it, both of you aware, both reflections of persistence. Then, with a flick of its feathers, it turns toward the sea. It spreads its arms, no, its wings, and for an instant you see the full geometry of flight. Muscle, bone, wind, will. The first motion is heavy, then effortless. It rises from the sand, water streaming from its feathers like liquid glass. You watch as it climbs, wings steady, until it merges with the gray horizon. You exhale, realizing you'd been holding your breath. Around you, the tide begins to pull back, leaving rippled patterns in the sand. You step into one of the tracks the creature left behind. It fits almost perfectly beneath your foot. You press your heel down gently, letting water fill the shape around your toes. For a moment, the past and present coexist in the same impression. A soft rain begins to fall, fine and even, barely disturbing the surface of the sea. You tilt your head back and let it touch your face. The sound of it blends with the waves until both become one long, soothing rhythm. You think of migration now, of invisible lines drawn through air and sea. Birds today still follow ancient routes encoded in their genes, paths shaped by continents that no longer exist. They cross oceans without maps, guided by magnetic fields, stars, and memory older than species. You realize that navigation is not learned, it's inherited, like heartbeat and hunger. You walk farther along the shore. The sand darkens as the tide recedes, revealing small fossils embedded in stone. Shells, coral fragments, the delicate outline of a fern. You kneel to study one. A small spiral, its symmetry perfect, even aeons. You think about how form endures even when life moves on, how the ocean preserves what the land forgets. The waves roll closer again, as if to reclaim what you found. You let them. The spiral vanishes beneath the water, and you smile. Everything here belongs to movement. You continue walking until you reach the cluster of rocks where the creature first stood. From this vantage, you can see far down the coastline, a vast sweep of world in motion. The clouds have begun to break, and sunlight pours through in streaks. The sea flashes in response, each wave catching fire before folding back into itself. You think again of that single glide, the moment the creature lifted from the sand and vanished into the gray. That was not escape, it was continuation. Every feather beat since then has been a signature in the same long song. You close your eyes and the sea fills your ears. The rhythm is steady, endless, familiar. Somewhere above the clouds, birds still trace those same ancestral lines, invisible but precise, circling the planet in patterns older than flight. You whisper to no one in particular. You never really left, did you? The waves answer, folding gently against the rocks. You stand there until the rain stops and the horizon clears, the salt drying softly on your skin. The world feels vast and yet somehow close enough to touch. The morning breaks cleaner, brighter, as though the storm-washed air has polished the horizon. You walk inland from the coast, where dunes rise and fall like the frozen waves of an ancient ocean. Each ridge glitters faintly with quartz grains, and the footprints you leave dissolve almost as soon as the wind touches them. You pause at the crest of a hill to watch the sea from a distance, how it folds and unfolds like a living lung, exhaling fog into the blue. Ahead, the dunes flatten into a broad plain scattered with strange low plants, ferns, horsetails, and something else, unfamiliar yet familiar. Their leaves shimmer with a faint waxy sheen, glinting silver when the wind brushes through. You kneel to touch one. The surface feels alive, resilient, an early adaptation to sun and dryness. A scent rises from the crushed leaf, sharp, clean, almost pine-like. You inhale deeply, and the memory of the rainforest lingers behind it, softened by salt and heat. The scientific truth grounding this moment is gentle but monumental. Plant life transformed the air itself. When vegetation evolved waxy coatings and deep roots, the exchange of oxygen and carbon began to regulate the planet's breath. Even before mammals and birds, the Earth was learning to breathe in balance. Every lung since, avian, reptilian, human, is an echo of those ancient leaves refining the chemistry of life. You stand and look across the plain. Heat shimmers above the ground. Beyond it, a shallow basin glows faintly with the reflection of a distant lake. You make your way toward it, the sound of your footsteps muffled in the sand. The air grows warmer, the scent of minerals stronger. As you draw closer, you realize the lake is not entirely still. It pulses, rippling from beneath as though something moves inside. You crouch at the edge where the water turns a smoky green. Beneath the surface, dark shapes glide in slow circles. Not fish exactly, larger, heavier, with elongated jaws and smooth, muscular bodies. You watch one rise briefly, its nostrils breaking the surface, then slipping back into shadow. Crocodilians, or something close to them. You realize that what you see now is another thread of continuity, life returning to water, reshaping itself without losing its history. A quiet fact hums through your thoughts. Crocodiles and birds, despite their differences, share a common ancestor. Their hearts, with 4 chambers, are nearly identical in function. Their eggs, hard-shelled and carefully guarded, evolved from the same blueprint. You picture a line of descent that bends, not breaks. Scaled patience on one end, feathered flight on the other. 2 ways of mastering survival. You watch one of the creatures slide closer to shore. Its eyes emerge just above the water, golden and still. It holds your gaze for a moment, the kind of stare that feels ancient, unsentimental, but aware. Then, with a small flick of its tail, it vanishes beneath the ripples, leaving only circles widening across the surface. You notice another movement nearby, not in the water, but above it. A small bird darts over the lake, wings beating in a blur. It skims the surface, catching insects as it goes, its reflection dancing with perfect precision. You can't help but smile. Predator and prey, separated by millions of years, yet perfectly synchronized by evolution's rhythm. A lesser-known tidbit drifts into your mind. Scientists once studied the flight mechanics of swallows and found that their wing structure shares similarities with early pterosaur fossils. The patterns of lift, drag, and motion identical in principle, refined by time. The idea that different species can arrive at the same design independently feels strangely comforting. Life, it seems, remembers what works. You sit on a rock watching sunlight break across the water. The surface sparkles like shattered glass. A gentle wind rises, carrying the scent of warmth and algae. It's a peaceful, almost sacred stillness, the kind of quiet that feels earned. As you listen, you realize something subtle. The air vibrates differently here. A low hum, almost imperceptible, resonates through your bones. You tilt your head, following it. Then you see them, small birds moving in coordinated waves above the plain, their wings catching light in flashes of bronze and white. They twist and fold through the air as if obeying a shared thought, a choreography without leader or command. You remember how you once watched herds move together on land and heard the forest sing in unison. Now the sky has learned the same lesson. The murmuration, the collective dance of flight, has begun. The scientific fact behind the beauty is as mesmerizing as the sight itself. Each bird responds only to the 6 or 7 nearest to it, yet the group behaves as one body, flowing like liquid through the air. No collisions, no confusion, just perfect emergent harmony. It's mathematics written in motion, a symphony of instinct. You stand watching the flock bend and shift like silk in wind. Patterns ripple across the sky, waves, spirals, flashes of pure geometry. For a moment, the sunlight hits them at just the right angle, and the air becomes luminous. You realize that you're seeing what the ancestors of these creatures must have seen too. Each other, alive in motion, shaping the air into meaning. A thought surfaces quietly, and you let it stay. Maybe this is how memory survives, not in fossils or feathers, but in the way life continues to move together. The wind changes again, and the flock turns as one, sweeping over the lake. Their reflections merge with the shadows beneath the water. Birds above, reptiles below, 2 timelines crossing in the same frame. You feel the connection so vividly, it almost aches. The murmuration fades toward the horizon, dissolving into the brightness of the day. The lake stills, the hum quiets, and the air feels soft again. You take a deep breath, the scent of water and warmth filling your lungs. You look down at your reflection and see a small feather stuck to your sleeve, caught there by the wind. You lift it gently. It's darker than the others, charcoal black with a subtle sheen of violet. It glows faintly in the sun, like oil on stone. You turn it between your fingers, and for the first time you notice something more than beauty. A message written in pattern, symmetry, precision. The story of air and survival condensed into structure. You let the feather go, and it spirals upward before drifting onto the surface of the lake. It floats there quietly, its reflection perfect. Around it, the ripples from unseen creatures widen, merging until the surface smooths again. You sit back down, closing your eyes. The sound of the waves, the wind, the faint splash of life, all merge into one steady, endless rhythm. Somewhere above you, a lone bird calls. The note rises, fades, then rises again. It's the same melody that began long before feathers, long before wings. The same song that turned thunder into breath. You open your eyes to the bright, steady horizon and whisper, "You kept singing."
Morning light tilts across the plain like a soft hand through water, and you follow it toward a low rise where the ground glitters faintly as if dusted with crushed shell. The air is cool, almost mint clean, and the breeze carries the quiet rustle of grasses you've come to recognize, a hush that makes every color feel more saturated, as though the world has been gently polished overnight. You climb slowly, palms brushing sun-warmed stone, and at the crest you find a scatter of small impressions in slate, a ghost of feathers pressed into the rock, barbs and barbules preserved in a pattern so precise it looks freshly combed. You kneel, and the light shows a darker sheen within the fossil's filaments, a shadow that isn't just shadow. There is color here, sleeping in stone. You remember the amber by the lake, the way it held a wing like a golden pause. This is different. This isn't a pause, but a translation. The scientific truth grounding you now is that fossil feathers sometimes preserve microscopic structures called melanosomes, tiny pigment packets whose shapes map to color. Rod-like eumelanosomes whisper blacks and grays. Rounder pheomelanosomes hint at russet and chestnut. Layered, plate-like arrangements can bend light into iridescence, the oil-on-water glow you've watched dance across hummingbirds and beetles. In 2010, the banded tail of Sinosauropteryx emerged from stone not as guesswork but as pattern, rusty rings like quiet lanterns along a filamented banner. In another feathered dinosaur, Anchiornis, researchers read a story of black and white with a crimson crest, punctuation in living ink. You exhale slowly, letting the breeze cool your face. A quick flicker of motion glides at the edge of your vision, and you look up to catch a small creature landing on a sunlit boulder.
A theropod no bigger than a jay, with feathers that seem plain until the light turns. Then its throat flashes like a wet pearl, toss of the head, and there it is, violet in one angle, green in another, then gone, tucked back into matte gray. You've seen the trick before in modern starlings and grackles. Structural color, not pigment, where microscopic architecture makes the air itself paint. The feather is a prism disguised as cloth. There's a playful, lesser-known tidbit here that makes you smile. Not all bird greens are the same green. Parrots craft theirs with unique yellow pigments called psittacofulvins, layered over blue structural scattering, a homegrown chemistry set that resists fading better than many carotenoids. Turacos, meanwhile, wear turacoverdin, a rare, true green pigment rich in copper, found almost nowhere else in birds. And flamingos borrow their pink from a borrowed meal, carotenoids in crustaceans and algae, proving that sometimes color is simply diet memorized by feathers. You picture a Cretaceous shoreline, creatures sifting shallows, their hues quietly edited by whatever the tide served that season. The wind carries a breath of rain that isn't there yet. You trace the fossil again, thinking of Microraptor with its lacquered sheen. Evidence suggests an iridescent crow-black shimmer. And Kaihan Tuji, rainbow first light, with plate-like melanosomes that likely threw a peacock's whisper across its head and neck. You imagine dusk in a Jurassic grove, muted browns and olives everywhere, and then a flick of living rainbow as the light slants just so. The forest was never only green. It was a dim theater where color saved its loudest lines for the perfect cue. You step away from the rock and notice the sky has paled to an even silk, sunlight sifted through a thin veil of cloud. In this diffused light, the small theropod on the boulder looks ordinary again, gray, practical, the working clothes of survival. And here rises the day's question, unhurried and kind. How much color did deep time really wear? Were the forests and floodplains secret carnivals of signal and display, or did brilliance flicker only at the margins, crest, tail tip, throat, where communication most needed its exclamation points? Fossil melanosomes answer some of it, but not all. Taphonomy edits, time smudges. Soft yellows and blues, often carried by fragile carotenoids or structural lattices that don't fossilize neatly, may vanish in the archive even if they blazed at sunrise. The debate lingers like a half-heard refrain. Were dinosaurs vividly dressed or elegantly understated? The truth may be a chorus of both. Downslope, a ribbon of water divides the plain, remembering your river from earlier sections with a smaller silver voice. Near its bank, reeds lean as if listening, and dragonflies hover like stained glass on invisible wires. One tilts and its body sparks emerald, then bronze, then ink, structural color again, built from layers thinner than a breath. The continuity makes you ache a little with joy. Beetle shell, fish scale, feather vein, all tweaking light with the same physical mischief. The planet learned to bend wavelengths, and life has been signing its name with the trick ever since. A pair of early birds lift from the reeds, and as they climb, you catch the matte negative beauty of their undersides, unshiny black that drinks light. You think of modern birds of paradise, some of whose super black feathers don't just look dark, they swallow nearly every photon, a velvet of microcanyons and light traps. Hues placed beside that abyss flare brighter by contrast, a stagecraft perfected by physics. Imagine such strategies here in a world of firsts. A throat patch made electric by the quiet that surrounds it, a dawn display where the bird seems to cut itself out of the air. You pick a fallen feather from the grass, barred in soft charcoal, edged with a line so sharp it could pass for a drawn note. Rolling it between finger and thumb, you feel the tiny resistance of hooklets meshing, the zipper sound nearly inaudible. Your memory returns to the storm-shed copper feather and the lake's gray gift. Together, they've become a little pocket museum of wavelengths. You tilt this one toward the diffused sun, and just at the margin, a blue appears that isn't in the vein so much as in the way the vein speaks to light. A breeze lifts, bringing a mineral hint, perhaps a promise of the volcano fields you crossed. Their ash once redecorated skies and soils, and you wonder how eruptions tinted lives. Did dust-choked dawns favor darker plumage for warmth or lighter for camouflage? Did iron-rich muds paint beaks and scales in transient ochres that became tradition? Culture doesn't belong solely to humans. Bowerbirds prove it now, curating blue baubles. Perhaps ancient kin curated sunlight itself, choosing perches that amplified their iridescence the way a stagehand angles a spotlight. A soft chittering rises behind you. The little theropod has hopped from its boulder to your shadow's edge, blinking as if you might be a moving piece of shade it can borrow. It bobs once, hello or assessment, and you notice a throat patch you missed before, a crescent that flashes teal when it exhales. Breath as color, song as light. The syrinx from the rainforest echoes here, voice and hue duet across feathers and air. You smile, and it mirrors the motion in a head tilt, then slips back into grass like a well-placed brushstroke. You think of countershading too, that quiet painter's trick many creatures still wear. Darker on top, lighter beneath, a gradient that erases shadow and flattens form. Evidence from Psittacosaurus suggests it wore this subtle cloak, a matte camouflage for dappled forests. Not every color is a shout. Many are lullabies to the eye, gentling boundaries until a body disappears. Even now, deer in your world blur at the edges at dusk, and seabirds become horizon when the sun sits low. A cloud thins, a coin of sun brightens the slope. A field of grasses lights up in a brief murmuration of gold. You close your eyes and let the warmth rest on your face. It occurs to you that evolution didn't just change shape, it changed palette, learning to paint with chemicals and grids, with diet and diffraction, with absence as much as presence. The feather is a canvas, the scale a lens, the world a slow-turning gallery. You open your eyes to the same slope, the same fossil, the same river thread, but everything looks slightly retuned, as if the day has nudged the saturation dial a hair to the right. You slide your palm once more over the stone feather, and in your mind, the darker streak within becomes a remembered crest, a ringed tail, a throat that once caught dusk like polished wine. Maybe you think color is how bodies keep speaking when mouths are still. Maybe it's how the living say, "I'm here," from across a clearing, and how the dead say, "I was," from inside the rock. The breeze shifts again, stirs the grasses, and a single filament floats free. No pigment, just pale, like a sigh you can see. It lifts, dances, and vanishes into the bright. You watch it go, your eyes resting where it was, the way you once watched a feather become horizon at the lake. Somewhere nearby, a call rings, a clear note, then another, a minimal melody that leaves you quieter than it found you. You turn toward the sound, and the land answers in color, a throat wink, a wing flash, a ripple of matte to gloss that tells a whole story without a word. You breathe with it, slow and even, and the morning breathes back.
By midday, the light has changed again, thinner now, angled, glinting from the edges of things rather than their faces. You follow the warmth across a landscape that seems to breathe in color. Red sand, green reeds, a far shimmer of water broken only by the slow tilt of wings. Every hue feels like a memory of some earlier dawn, and in each tone you sense the story still unfolding. Ahead, the ground dips into a shallow basin lined with ash-gray stone. At its center lies a sheet of hardened mud cracked into tessellations. You kneel beside one of the cracks and trace it with a fingertip. The mud is scored by faint, feathered lines, tiny scratches fanning outward from a central point. Lightning? Wind? Then you notice a pattern repeating across the surface, radiating and swirling. These are not random. They are prints, wing-tip traces, the marks of something that once landed here to feed, rest, or perhaps to dance. The scientific truth grounding you here, certain fossil beds preserve dinosaurian rain shadows, the impressions of wings and feathers pressed into soft sediment. In places like Korea and Utah, whole surfaces show alternating footprints and wing drags, evidence of creatures that both walked and flew, testing each medium as if the air and the earth were partners. You rest your palm over one shallow groove, marveling at how fragile gestures can outlast mountains. You close your eyes and listen. The plain hums quietly. Cicadas, the sigh of heat across grass, the faint clicking of small stones shifting under sun.
When you open your eyes, something moves at the edge of vision, small figures gathered near a cluster of reeds. At first, they seem like birds, but as you step closer, you notice the length of their tails, the balance in their stance. Half feathers, half muscle, each creature radiates a quiet confidence. They hunt with precision, snapping at insects that hover above the water. Their reflections ripple, doubling the sense of motion, two worlds overlapping, air and its mirror. You sit in the shade of a low tree and simply watch. One creature spreads its wings and lowers them into the shallows, starring mud in arcs that catch sunlight. Another flicks its tail, scattering droplets that shine like glass. It feels playful. You realize that behavior, experiment, curiosity must be as old as fear or hunger. These animals are learning their world by touching it over and over until motion becomes meaning. A gentle, lesser-known fact drifts into your thoughts. The ancestors of many shorebirds learned rhythm from water. The pattern of waves guided their feeding dances and territorial displays. Even today, plovers and sandpipers time their steps with the pulse of the tide, a choreography inherited from landscapes like this one. Instinct, it seems, is geography remembered in the body. The wind shifts, carrying the faint scent of sulfur and stone. Far off, a dark ridge exhales a plume of steam, volcanic vents that never quite sleep. You imagine eruptions staining the sky crimson, scattering ash that will one day harden into the layers paleontologists read like scripture. Life here is fragile, yes, but also resilient. Each eruption resets the palette, and still, the painters return. A sudden rustle above pulls your gaze upward. A small flock passes overhead, wings flashing silver against the sun. They fly low, skimming the warm air, their formation loose but harmonious. You watch the leader shift aside, another taking its place seamlessly. The murmuration you witnessed by the lake lives here too, in smaller echoes. Every species learns cooperation its own way. You rise, stepping toward the water's edge. The reflections are sharper now, almost metallic. You can see the sky inverted perfectly, a second world beneath the surface. You toss a pebble and watch the circles widen, merging until both worlds distort and settle again. The air smells faintly of iron and wet moss. Here comes the question, soft but insistent. What color was the air after the impact, when dust veiled the sun? Did wings still shimmer then, or did the world briefly forget its brightness? Scientists say that in the years following the great asteroid, sunlight thinned to a red dusk at noon, plants withered, oceans cooled, and yet, somewhere, a heartbeat persisted. Tiny creatures, birds, small enough to hide in burrows or coastal mangroves, endured. Their bones, hollow yet strong, became vessels of survival. Evolution had rehearsed for catastrophe. You look at the flock again, knowing that their descendants will face that darkness and emerge. The realization settles in you like warmth. Every songbird's trill is an afterglow of that perseverance. A dragonfly lands on your sleeve, its compound eyes glinting turquoise. For a moment, the world feels still enough to hold eternity in a single breath. Then it lifts, vanishing in a thin line of light. You smile at its timing. Life never lingers longer than necessary. It moves precisely at the speed of continuation. The sun begins its descent, washing the plain in honey. The small feathered hunters retreat into the reeds, their silhouettes melting into bronze. The heat eases, replaced by the gentle exhale of evening wind. You sit down again, tracing another wing mark in the cracked mud, and it feels less like history and more like handwriting, letters addressed to whoever would one day kneel here. You whisper to the prince, "I'm listening." The wind stirs once, carrying a faint rustle that could almost be an answer. Perhaps it says, "We changed shape, but never silence." The last light curls around the horizon, silver on water, gold on stone, and then the color drains quietly, leaving only outlines, the promise that morning will rewrite everything again.
Dawn unfolds like the turning of a page. Pale lavender at first, then rose gold, then the clear white of a new beginning. You wake to the sound of wings, hundreds of them, a soft, steady rhythm in the air, somewhere between rain and breath.
You rise and walk toward it, each step muffled in the dew-drenched grass. The plain opens before you, bathed in mist that glows with early sunlight. The flock is waiting there, hundreds of small birds perched along the edge of a marsh. Their feathers catch the light differently with every movement, turning the morning into a living prism. Some stretch their wings lazily, others preen, others simply watch the horizon as though waiting for a signal older than the sun. You stop at a respectful distance, unwilling to disturb the quiet choreography. The air smells of damp earth and sweet decay, the scent of new life built on old matter. You can hear the small sounds of the flock, the rustle of feathers, the quick click of beaks, the whisper of feet on wet reeds. It feels less like noise and more like language, something continuous, layered, self-contained. The scientific truth grounding this morning is one of precision. The eyes of birds evolved to see in color ranges humans can't imagine. Many species perceive ultraviolet light, invisible to you but radiant to them. Feathers that look drab to human eyes blaze with hidden signals, maps of identity, attraction, and belonging. What you see as gray is, to them, a spectrum of light written in secret ink. You crouch low and watch one bird preen the feathers of another, each movement deliberate. They turn their heads to meet each other's gaze, and for a moment you see an intelligence beyond instinct. These gestures, mutual grooming, mirrored stillness, are as old as trust itself. Connection didn't begin with words, it began with touch, with the care of one creature for another. A small group lifts suddenly, startled by some invisible change in air pressure. They rise in a spiral, their wings catching the dawn. You watch their eyes as they move, sharp, unblinking, always scanning. Birds see motion faster than you do. Their vision updates at a higher rate, making your world seem slow by comparison. To them, time stretches like elastic. Every blink of yours is a second of theirs. Perhaps that's why their flight seems effortless. They live in more moments than you do. You remember something you once read. Birds evolved a double fovea in each eye, allowing them to track ground and sky simultaneously. They can look forward and sideways, judge distance with uncanny precision. The mind adjusts to such awareness, shaping behavior, shaping grace. Vision, like breath, defines possibility. You follow the flock's movement as they circle and settle again. The rising sun scatters their reflections across the marsh water. Each ripple catches a fragment of sky until the ground itself seems to shimmer with wings. You think about light, how it defines color, mood, life. On other worlds, beneath other suns, evolution might have chosen entirely different palettes. Here, on this planet, our particular sun decided everything: the hue of leaves, the glow of feathers, the warmth of skin. You step closer to the water. The flock parts slightly, making space without alarm. You see more detail now, different shapes of beaks, subtle gradients of feathers, patterns that seem designed but are entirely accidental. Evolution, you think, is both artist and gambler. The same random chance that shaped a predator's claw also painted these delicate wings. The difference is purpose, or perhaps perspective. You kneel, dipping your hand into the marsh. The water is cool, silky. A thin layer of pollen floats on the surface, yellow and iridescent. Each grain is a promise, a life waiting for a carrier, for flight. You watch as a breeze stirs the surface, sending tiny ripples outward. Pollen lifts, carried skyward in invisible currents, joining the same air that sustains wings. You realize how connected everything truly is. The breath you take, the lift beneath feathers, the sway of trees, they all rely on the same invisible exchange. A lesser-known tidbit surfaces. Birds have hollow bones, not just for lightness, but for airflow. Air passes through their skeletons, cooling them in flight and fueling endurance. You imagine your own body with such design, each breath flowing through you, effortless, unbroken. The idea feels peaceful, almost meditative. To live as they do is to merge movement and breath into a single act. You look up again, and the flock has begun to move, slowly at first, then all at once. A wave of motion ripples through the group. They lift in near silence, hundreds rising together, wings catching sunlight until the air fills with gleaming arcs. The sound is soft, immense, alive. For a moment, the entire marsh becomes sky. You tilt your head back and follow their ascent. They rise in a spiral that tightens, then unwinds, a ribbon of life against the pale morning. The light bends around them, scattering through feathers, turning the air itself into color. You can almost see the invisible wavelengths they see, the ultraviolet trails left behind like threads in sunlight. And then, just as quickly, they turn eastward and vanish into the brightness. Silence falls again, but it's not empty. It's filled with residue, the faint rush of displaced air, the shimmer of disturbed water, the echo of wings fading into distance. You realize that stillness is simply another form of flight, a pause that lets the world catch its breath. You stand for a long time, watching the mist lift from the marsh. Tiny insects hover in columns of light, reeds sway gently as though sighing in contentment. The smell of wet earth grows sweeter as the sun climbs higher. You pick up a single feather left behind, its edge tipped with violet, a fragment of the invisible spectrum made visible. You hold it to the light, and for a heartbeat, it glows from within. Maybe sight itself is memory, light revisiting what it once touched. You tuck the feather behind your ear and begin to walk again, following the direction the flock took. The air feels different now, lighter, richer, full of invisible colors. You can't see them, but you believe in them all the same.
The day matures gently as you walk eastward. The air is warmer now, heavy with the sweetness of flowering ferns and something faintly metallic, the scent of stone warming under sun. The land undulates in small ridges, each one layered with the quiet signatures of time. Fossil leaves, ripple marks, fragments of shells turned to stone. You feel the soft crunch of ancient matter beneath your feet and think about how the earth never forgets. It only rearranges its memories into new shapes. Ahead, the ground rises toward a low escarpment streaked with color. Layers of ochre, gray, and red fold over one another like pages half burned. You climb slowly, resting your hand on the rock as you go. It's warm from the sun, smooth in some places, rough in others. When you reach the top, you find yourself standing before an open face of stone, a natural wall carved by erosion. Across its surface runs a pattern of lines and whorls, faint but unmistakable, the cross-section of an ancient forest turned to rock. You approach and trace one with your fingertip. The lines spiral outward like fingerprints. You realize you're looking at the fossilized trunk of a tree, petrified over eons, its cells replaced by quartz. It glimmers faintly where the light hits it. Each ring marks a year, some thick, some thin, centuries of climate, growth, drought, recovery. You're staring at time made tangible. The scientific truth grounding this moment feels both intimate and vast. Trees keep diaries in wood, and even fossil trees remember. Dendrochronology, the study of growth rings, can reconstruct seasons long vanished. The width of each band reveals how the world once breathed: wet years, dry years, volcanic winters, distant impacts. A forest's biography preserved in silence. You realize that if life is a language, then trees were among the first long-form storytellers. A breeze stirs, carrying the earthy scent of resin and dust. You step back to take in the entire wall. It's more than one tree, there are several, their trunks intersecting like chapters overlapping. This isn't a graveyard, it's an archive. You imagine the forest that once stood here, leaves thick and fanning, shadows shifting as feathered creatures glided between branches. You can almost hear them, the rustle of wings, the creak of wood under claw. A curious, lesser-known tidbit surfaces. Some Cretaceous trees, the ancestors of modern redwoods and magnolias, grew in polar latitudes where months passed without sun. To survive, they evolved ways to slow their metabolism, storing light in memory rather than in leaves. Even in darkness, they continued their quiet work. You think of that now, running your hand across the smooth fossil grain. Even silence can photosynthesize. You sit on a nearby boulder and let your eyes follow the patterns in the rock. They spiral, twist, merge, like rivers of memory frozen mid-current. You take out the feather tucked behind your ear and place it on your palm beside a small piece of quartz. The contrast is striking. One soft, one solid, one fleeting, one eternal.
Yet both are forms of record, each capturing a moment in different languages. The feather writes in motion, the stone in stillness. A faint hum interrupts your thoughts. You glance up to see a dragonfly hovering at eye level, its wings vibrating with iridescent precision. You can almost see the muscles under the translucent skin moving faster than your eyes can track. You remember reading that dragonflies beat their wings independently, 4 at a time, allowing them to hover, dart, or even fly backward. You watch it balance effortlessly in the breeze, a living fossil whose lineage predates nearly everything else alive around you. The air shifts, and the sound of the river you once followed returns, distant but recognizable. You follow it down from the ridge, through a slope scattered with fallen petrified logs. They lie like sleeping giants, gleaming faintly in the sun. Each trunk is a reminder that even the hardest things were once soft, once alive. At the base of the slope, you find a shallow cave carved into the stone. The entrance is fringed with moss and lichen, the color of old copper. You step inside, eyes adjusting to the dimness. The air is cool and the walls glisten faintly. Then you see it, a pattern etched into the rock. Not natural, deliberate. It's a sequence of impressions, shapes pressed into the stone by something ancient. Claws, perhaps, or the tail sweep of a small animal. But between them are strange rhythmic marks, like someone tapping the same spot repeatedly. You run your fingers along the pattern. It feels intentional, as if something long ago was trying to leave a message in the only language it had: repetition. You step back and realize how the marks flow in a gentle curve, following the arc of the wall. You imagine a creature taking shelter here, perhaps preening, perhaps drumming its tail in thoughtless rhythm. It wasn't communication, not yet, but the impulse was there, the urge to make marks, to echo oneself into permanence. Maybe art began like this, not as a message to others, but an imprint of existence. A scientific whisper returns to you. Birds are some of the few animals that make sound purely for pleasure. Song isn't just survival, it's expression. Even if no one listens, they still sing. Perhaps these scratches are an early verse in that same continuum, the fossilized prelude to music. You sit down in the cool cave, back against the wall, and close your eyes. The air hums faintly, as though the rock itself remembers vibration. You imagine the sound of feathers brushing stone, claws tapping rhythm, a quiet melody of persistence. When you open your eyes, dust motes drift through a shaft of light, spinning like tiny galaxies. You leave the cave slowly, stepping back into the bright world. The sky has deepened to cobalt, and far above, a flock of white birds crosses in formation, their wings flashing like mirrors. For a moment, their reflection in your eyes overlap the memory of the fossil wall, the old and the living layered perfectly. You smile. Time isn't a line, you think. It's a spiral, and you're walking along its edge. Every heartbeat is a ring in a tree trunk, a ripple in stone, a note in a song that began long before language. You whisper to the wind, "I hear you." And the wind, as always, answers softly in return.
The path beyond the fossil wall slopes gently toward the coast again, winding through a low field of sand and grass. The air tastes different here, cleaner, carrying a mineral sweetness that comes only from places where the land meets the sea. You walk slowly, letting your feet sink into the soft ground. Every step leaves a faint imprint that the breeze immediately begins to erase. The ocean is close. You can smell it before you hear it. When the dunes finally open, you stop. Before you lies a shoreline so still it could be mistaken for glass. The water is shallow and endless, reflecting the faint blush of the late afternoon sky. The tide is out, revealing smooth flats of wet sand streaked with ancient color, pale blues, rusty reds, traces of green algae catching the light. You notice something else. Rows of impressions leading toward the water, three-toed and evenly spaced, their pattern almost identical to those you found at the first riverbank. You kneel, brushing a layer of silt away with your hand. The print beneath it is perfect, clear, symmetrical, the claw marks precise. Beside it is another, smaller, perhaps a juvenile. The two sets run parallel for several meters before curving gently together.
You follow the tracks slowly, step by step, imagining the creatures that made them walking side by side, their reflections moving across the tidal flats. The scientific truth grounding this moment, trace fossils, ichnites, often capture what body fossils can't. They record motion, behavior, even emotion. Paleontologists have found trackways showing adults pacing beside smaller companions, suggesting parental care long before mammals refined it. Here, in this fossilized path, you can almost feel it, the shared rhythm of protection, of togetherness written in mud. The air grows still, the only sound the soft hiss of distant waves. You look up, and for a brief instant, the world feels layered again, the living tide and the ghost of ancient travelers beneath it. The horizon glows faintly pink. Far out to sea, the silhouettes of seabirds drift above the water, their wings dark against the light. You can't tell where the line between past and present ends. You walk farther along the shore, following the path where the sand meets stone. Small shells glitter like tiny mirrors in the evening light. Some are spiral, others perfectly smooth, polished by time. You pick one up, a fragment of something long dead, yet still beautiful. Its surface hums faintly with salt, and when you hold it to your ear, the old illusion holds true. A faint, rhythmic sound, like the echo of the ocean trapped inside. You know it's just air, but the magic is real anyway. A whisper of memory comes to you, something you once read, that seashells can store the acoustics of the environments they formed in, their spiral geometry amplifying frequencies that match ancient tides. It's poetic, but not far from truth. The world is full of instruments that never stop resonating. You set the shell back down and crouch to watch a crab scuttle past, its claws clicking like a metronome. Life endures here, reshaped but unbroken. The creatures of this shoreline aren't the same as those that once crossed it, but their purpose is familiar: to live, to adapt, to repeat. A faint flutter draws your gaze upward. A small flock of plovers swoops low over the water, their reflections gliding beneath them like shadows from another age. Their calls are light, musical, almost curious. You follow their flight until they settle a few meters away, pecking delicately at the sand. The smallest one stops, cocks its head, and stares at you. For a moment, you're not sure who's studying whom. A lesser-known tidbit surfaces. The modern plover's bone structure is remarkably similar to some small theropod dinosaurs, even down to the articulation of the ankle joint. When paleontologists compare their movements, they find near-perfect parallels: the same posture, the same center of gravity, the same confident, springy gait. You look at the bird again and see it differently now, not as a fragile creature, but as a survivor in miniature, carrying a legacy that once thundered across continents. The plover steps forward, leaves a single clear footprint in the wet sand, and then flits away. You crouch to look at it. It's almost identical to the ancient ones beside it, only smaller, lighter. You run your finger around its edge and realize you're touching two timelines at once: the fossilized and the living, the remembered and the continuing. A wave rolls in, gentle but steady. The water fills both prints, the old and the new, merging them for a moment before smoothing them away. The sight is strangely comforting. Nothing truly vanishes, it just moves into a different form. The sun begins its descent. The horizon turns from gold to orange to the deep violet of approaching night. You find a small rock to sit on and watch the colors bleed into each other. The tide inches closer, erasing the last of the day's marks. The air cools, and you wrap your arms around your knees, breathing in the faint, rhythmic salt of the world. You think about continuity again, how every living thing carries a memory older than itself. The dinosaurs didn't die out in a blaze of ruin. They lingered, transformed, learned to glide, to sing, to soar. And even now, they walk beside the sea, leaving small, perfect footprints that mirror the ones that came before. A soft question rises in your mind. What of humanity's prints? Will they fossilize as gracefully, as gently? Will someone, one day, kneel beside the traces we leave and find beauty rather than noise? You watch the waves erase the last of the tracks and realize maybe that doesn't matter. What endures isn't the mark, it's the motion. The decision to keep walking, to keep evolving, even when the tide keeps coming in. A cool gust brushes past your face, carrying the faint cry of a distant bird. You tilt your head and listen. The sound fades into the rhythm of the surf, blending into the planet's oldest lullaby. You close your eyes and let it cradle you. The prints are gone, but their memory lingers beneath you. Somewhere in the darkening sky, wings still move through air that remembers everything. A soft question rises in your mind. What of humanity's prints? Will they fossilize as gracefully, as gently? Will someone, one day, kneel beside the traces we leave and find beauty rather than noise? You watch the waves erase the last of the tracks and realize maybe that doesn't matter. What endures isn't the mark, it's the motion. The decision to keep walking, to keep evolving, even when the tide keeps coming in. A cool gust brushes past your face, carrying the faint cry of a distant bird. You tilt your head and listen. The sound fades into the rhythm of the surf, blending into the planet's oldest lullaby. You close your eyes and let it cradle you. The prints are gone, but their memory lingers beneath you. Somewhere in the darkening sky, wings still move through air that remembers everything. A soft question rises in your mind. What of humanity's prints? Will they fossilize as gracefully, as gently? Will someone, one day, kneel beside the traces we leave and find beauty rather than noise? You watch the waves erase the last of the tracks and realize maybe that doesn't matter. What endures isn't the mark, it's the motion. The decision to keep walking, to keep evolving, even when the tide keeps coming in. A cool gust brushes past your face, carrying the faint cry of a distant bird. You tilt your head and listen. The sound fades into the rhythm of the surf, blending into the planet's oldest lullaby. You close your eyes and let it cradle you. The prints are gone, but their memory lingers beneath you. Somewhere in the darkening sky, wings still move through air that remembers everything.
Night arrives softly, not as an ending, but as an unveiling. The last glimmer of sunlight slips beneath the sea, leaving a smooth, infinite blue that deepens into velvet. Stars begin to appear one by one, distant, patient, each one humming faintly above the horizon. The air cools, scented with salt and wet stone, and you find yourself walking inland again, following the sound of a forest you can't yet see. The world grows darker, but not silent. Crickets pulse in slow, even rhythm. A breeze moves through the tall grasses, whispering secrets in a language older than words. The sound is hypnotic, soothing, a heartbeat stretched across the land. You realize you've begun to hum without meaning to, matching the pattern around you. It feels instinctive, like breathing. As you near the edge of the forest, something new rises from within it, a sound so pure it feels like light. A long, clear note floats through the trees, then another and another. A bird is singing, though not as a call or warning. The tone is too deliberate, too beautiful. You stop walking and listen. The melody unfurls in gentle arcs, lingering between phrases. Each pause feels intentional, as though the singer is aware of its own silence. You take a slow step closer. The song seems to come from high in the canopy, where the moonlight filters through leaves. You can't see the creature, but you can hear its presence. A voice both fragile and infinite, carrying through the night air like silk. The scientific truth grounding this moment is elegant. Birdsong is not mere instinct. It's learned, practiced, refined. Some species memorize hundreds of patterns, modifying them through mimicry and improvisation. In a way, each song is an individual signature, a blend of heritage and innovation. Much like language, it's both inherited and invented anew. You stand beneath the trees, head tilted upward, and think of how sound travels differently at night. Cooler air carries vibrations farther. The forest itself amplifies and bends them. Perhaps that's why the singer waits until dark, to let its voice travel unbroken, carried gently by temperature and time. A softer note joins the first, then another. Two voices now, weaving between branches. Their phrases echo, overlap, resolve. It's not chaos, it's harmony. You realize you're listening to a duet,
Two birds communicating through melody, shaping space together. Their dialogue moves like tidewater, retreating and returning, never still. A lesser-known tidbit drifts through your mind. Certain species of wrens and thrushes can time their overlapping songs so precisely that they never collide in frequency. It's a natural symphony built from respect, each voice aware of the other's presence, leaving space where needed. You wonder what would happen if humans listened that way, each word mindful of the gaps it might fill or leave behind. The forest around you hums in response. Frogs add low notes from unseen pools, and the wind adds its own whisper through the canopy. The result isn't just sound, it's equilibrium. Every tone belongs exactly where it is. You walk deeper into the forest, following the melody. The moonlight grows brighter, filtering through the leaves in soft columns. Between the beams, particles of mist drift lazily, catching the faintest shimmer. You realize that even here, color hasn't left, it's only changed scale. Silver where daylight was gold, stillness where motion once was. The song continues, and as you listen, it changes subtly. The notes slow, the intervals lengthen, the melody softens. It's as if the singers are winding down with the night, exchanging lullabies instead of declarations. You lean against a tree and let the sound wash through you, each note dissolving in the next like waves against sand. The thought arrives gently. Perhaps sound was the first inheritance, before color, before flight. The pulse of wind, the rhythm of rain, the low groan of tectonic plates shifting, all of it music before life ever had ears to hear it. The dinosaurs might have joined in without knowing, vibrations through chest cavities, drumming through the earth, the earliest murmurs of song. A brief movement catches your eye. From the shadows, a small bird glides down to perch on a low branch not far from you. Its feathers are dark, but the throat glows faintly white in the moonlight. It cocks its head, studies you, then opens its beak. The next note emerges softer, directed, not a warning, but an acknowledgement. You smile, feeling an absurd tenderness. The boundary between observer and observed disappears for a moment. You think of something beautiful and true. Modern research suggests that birds, like humans, dream. During sleep, their brains replay song patterns, strengthening memory, refining pitch. Even in rest, they practice. You imagine this bird tonight, its song looping in dreams long after you've walked away, echoing through a neural maze shaped by millions of years of adaptation. Music as both habit and hope. The air cools further, and mist begins to thicken near the ground. You pull your arms around yourself, listening to the forest breathe. The duet continues somewhere higher, fainter now, but steady. The notes seem to fade into the stars, as if the sky itself is learning the melody. You take one last look upward. The bird on the branch blinks once, slow, unhurried, then launches into the air. Its wings catch a ray of moonlight, and for an instant it glows, a moving constellation, vanishing into the canopy above. The music continues, but you can no longer tell where it comes from. It could be one voice, or 10, or the wind itself learning to sing. You close your eyes and breathe deeply. The rhythm of the forest aligns with your heartbeat. The distinction between your inhale and the night's exhale blurs. You realize that perhaps every living thing participates in this great wordless harmony, even when silent. The last note fades. The night holds its breath, perfectly still. And then, from far away, another begins.
When dawn finally comes, it feels shy, light unfurling carefully between the branches, the color of rose tea poured across the canopy. You open your eyes to a hush so complete it feels deliberate, as if the world itself is waiting for something to begin. The forest smells of rain that hasn't yet fallen, cool and vegetal. You stretch, slow and quiet, and the birds above you stir in kind, shifting softly in their sleep. Their wings make a sound like paper sighing. You walk until the trees thin and the air opens into a wide savanna dotted with low shrubs and the skeletons of ancient trees bleached white by sun.
The horizon hums faintly in heat. You stand for a while at the edge of it, feeling small but at ease, the way a single thought feels inside a long, slow dream. A breeze moves through, and in it you hear something faint, a steady thrum, rhythmic but distant. It reminds you of the river's pulse, but this sound is lighter, almost hollow. You follow it, the ground firm and dry under your feet. Soon you see them, a group of large birds standing in a loose circle, their heads high, necks long, eyes calm. Ostriches, or their ancestors, faces etched with quiet patience. They move slowly, deliberate as clock hands, stepping around each other with care. When one shifts, the others mirror it, an unspoken geometry in motion. You watch, transfixed, realizing that this dance is older than memory, ritual without choreography, grace without audience. The scientific truth grounding you here is one of connection. The bones of modern ostriches, emus, and cassowaries echo the architecture of ancient theropods, the same wishbone, the same air-filled vertebrae, even the same ratio of leg to body length. They are the earth-bound heirs of creatures that once ruled the sky and ground alike. When they run, they still move like history remembering itself. You crouch a short distance away, watching as the tallest bird lowers its head and begins to draw a shallow line in the dirt with its beak. Another follows, copying the gesture, then another. Within minutes, the circle around them becomes patterned with loops and arcs. They aren't random. The marks spiral outward from a center point, forming a shape that looks oddly deliberate, like ripples spreading across still water. You remember a curious detail. Many birds today create patterns in the soil to attract mates, bowerbirds building arched halls from sticks, sand grouse arranging pebbles, flamingos performing synchronized movements that look like choreography. The instinct to create beauty, to make pattern from chaos, may be as old as life itself. These loops in the dust are a continuation of that same quiet compulsion. A smaller bird steps into the circle and begins to move in a half-run, half-dance. Its wings flick outward, catching light, the dust rising around it like smoke. You feel as though you're watching art being invented. The others watch, their eyes steady, until the dancer stops, lowers its head, and walks calmly away. There's no applause, only the faint sound of wind across feathers. The act was its own completion. You think of the feathers you've collected along this journey, how each one seemed to hum with purpose. The hollow bone, the lightweight structure, the microscopic barbs, they all culminate here, in these movements. What began as survival has become expression. The earth itself seems to approve, the ground shimmering faintly in the rising heat. You sit cross-legged on the dry grass and study the marks left behind. The spirals and arcs overlap, crossing and merging until they resemble the swirl of a fingerprint or the inside of a seashell. You touch one groove with your finger. It's warm from the sun. For a fleeting moment, it feels like touching a heartbeat trapped in soil. A lesser-known fact surfaces. The bones of large flightless birds are hollow but reinforced with internal struts, an evolutionary compromise between lightness and strength. You think about that balance, the need to endure without collapsing, to move without burden. Maybe that's what evolution perfects most of all, the art of being both grounded and free. You lie back in the grass, watching the sky expand above you. Clouds stretch like wings, their undersides glowing gold in the new light. The air vibrates faintly as the ostriches begin to move off, their long strides rhythmic and even. When they run, their feet barely touch the earth. You watch until they blur into the horizon, their shapes shimmering in heat. You stay there for a long while, the sound of their footsteps fading until all that remains is the wind. Somewhere nearby, a lizard scurries over dry leaves. The scent of sage and dust fills your lungs. The sun is warm on your skin. You close your eyes and let your mind drift. You think of all the movements that have brought you here, the river's flow, the storm's breath, the flight of wings, the song of night. Each was a different form of the same rhythm, the earth learning to speak through motion. You realize that maybe you've been following a single heartbeat all along, disguised in many tempos. When you open your eyes again, the patterns in the dirt are already fading under the shifting wind. You smile. Impermanence feels right. If everything lasted forever, nothing would move. You rise and dust off your hands. The horizon is bright now, the kind of brightness that promises distance but not loneliness. You start walking towards it, each step stirring a faint puff of dust that glows briefly before disappearing. Behind you, the marks vanish entirely, leaving the ground smooth again. But in your mind, they continue, the spirals, the dance, the dust rising in golden light. Creation doesn't need to be permanent, you think. It just needs to happen. The wind carries a sound, faint and steady, the low hum of wings from somewhere unseen. You look up and smile. The air is never empty.
The savanna gives way to rock, an expanse of worn stone, cracked and folded like the palm of an ancient hand. You follow a narrow ridge downward until the air cools again, trading the dry shimmer of heat for the damp perfume of moss and mist. A faint roar hums through the distance, rhythmic and deep. When you round the bend, you see it, a waterfall spilling from a cliff into a basin of turquoise water, smoke rising where droplets meet sunlight. You stop and listen. The sound fills the space like a steady heartbeat, ancient and patient. The wind from the fall carries a fine spray that dampens your face, salt mingling with sweetness. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the mist rest on your skin, and it feels almost like breathing underwater. You walk closer until you stand at the pool's edge. Beneath the surface, the rocks gleam with mineral color, greens, ambers, faint lines of quartz like lightning frozen in stone. Fish glide through the clear water, their scales flickering in the light like shifting constellations. You crouch to watch them. Their movements are effortless, serpentine, beautiful. The scientific truth grounding this moment is the persistence of form. The design of vertebrates, the spine, the limbs, the symmetrical architecture of motion has remained remarkably consistent for hundreds of millions of years. Whether in water, air, or land, life rearranges the same bones into infinite variations. You realize that evolution doesn't reinvent, it recomposes, like a musician revisiting an old melody in a new key. You sit on a smooth stone and trail your fingers in the pool. The water is cool and alive, slipping through your hand in streams that sparkle briefly before disappearing. You can feel the faint vibration of the waterfall through the rock beneath you, steady, unbroken, like the pulse of the planet. Above, perched on a narrow ledge halfway up the cliff, a group of small birds gathers, their bodies silhouetted against the light. You can't see their colors clearly, only their shapes, graceful, balanced, utterly at home amid the roar of falling water. One steps forward and dives. For a heartbeat, it's only a shadow slicing through mist, then a flare of wings and motion. It lands in the pool with the precision of a raindrop. A lesser-known tidbit floats through your mind. Certain species of modern birds, like the dippers of the Himalayas, can dive beneath rushing water, walking along the stream bed with folded wings while their bodies remain warm, dry, and buoyant. Their ancestors, perhaps, learned this trick at places like this, where air and water meet, where survival means learning the language of both. The small diver surfaces again near your feet. You watch it shake droplets from its feathers, each one catching light before it falls back into the pool. The bird tilts its head, and for a fleeting moment you see its eyes, bright, intelligent, aware. It seems to study you with quiet curiosity before paddling away, leaving a ripple that merges with the waterfall's rhythm. You lean back on your hands and gaze up through the spray. The sunlight fractures through the mist, creating faint halos that shift and fade like breath on glass. You remember how the river once whispered, how the ocean sang in rhythm, and you realize the same song continues here, transposed into the key of falling water. The noise is powerful but not harsh. It envelops you the way silence did in the cave, a sound so complete it becomes stillness. You breathe deeply,
and the air tastes pure, mineral-rich. Every inhale feels older than lungs, older than life, as though you're breathing from the same wellspring that once nourished the first cells in the sea. You glance down and notice small fossils embedded in the rock by your feet. The faint spiral of a shell, the impression of fern fronds, a delicate trace of something feathered. Each one captures a pause between transformations. You touch the fern print lightly. The grooves are shallow but precise, each vein preserved as if time itself had gently into the stone. A scientific wonder drifts through your thoughts. In layers like these, isotopes of carbon and oxygen reveal ancient temperatures, rainfall, even atmospheric pressure. The rocks themselves carry records of climate, as surely as trees record years. You're sitting inside a memory too vast to comprehend, written not in ink or song, but in chemistry. You stand, moving closer to the waterfall. The ground trembles faintly beneath your feet. Droplets bead on your skin, cool and bright. You reach out your hand into the falling water, and it feels alive, almost sentient. You imagine this same water's journey, rising as mist, drifting as cloud, returning as rain. Every molecule has traveled across eons, across continents, through bodies, through time. Perhaps even through the breath of dinosaurs. The thought is grounding. You stand there for a while, your arm extended into the cascade, letting the world move through you. The boundary between what's living and what's simply flowing disappears. When you finally step back, your hair and clothes are soaked, but you don't mind. The air warms you instantly. You climb onto a flat rock near the base of the fall and sit cross-legged, watching light scatter across the mist. Tiny rainbows form and vanish again, repeating endlessly. A question rises quietly. Do you think the dinosaurs saw rainbows? You imagine great herds under volcanic skies, storms clearing, light breaking through. Maybe they paused, just as you are now, sensing beauty without needing to name it. The waterfall's rhythm deepens as the sun lowers behind the cliffs. The light turns amber, then bronze. Shadows stretch long and soft across the basin. You feel the day exhaling. The sound of the water becomes a lullaby, steady, unending, soothing. You close your eyes. Behind your lids, the sound of the waterfall becomes a heartbeat again, and you know that it's not just the Earth's, it's yours too.
When you open your eyes, evening has come softly, like a tide moving through air. The light around the waterfall is amber now, diffused through the mist. You watch as insects drift in the last glow, their wings trembling gold before disappearing into shadow. The world feels both wide and hushed, every motion deliberate, every sound clear but gentle. You stand, stretching, and follow a narrow path that winds upward along the cliffs. The ground is damp beneath your feet, laced with moss and veins of quartz. The roar of the waterfall fades behind you until it becomes a distant hum, steady as breath. Soon, the terrain flattens into a plateau overlooking a vast inland sea. The air here is cool, scented faintly with salt and something floral, perhaps blooms from unseen reeds along the water's edge. The surface of the lake glows like burnished metal under the evening light. You walk toward it, your reflection forming and fading in the rippling shallows. The water's edge is crowded with reeds that sway in a rhythm older than wind, their motions so subtle it feels orchestrated. Beyond them, dark shapes move beneath the surface, large, slow, deliberate. Then, one breaks through. A long, sleek body rises, glistening in the low sun. The head that follows is unmistakable. Reptilian, narrow, jaw lined with teeth like shards of glass. A ripple of recognition passes through you. One of the marine reptiles, a descendant of the lineage that ruled these waters long after dinosaurs learned to walk and fly. Its eyes, golden and unblinking, catch the light like ancient mirrors. It exhales softly, the sound like a sigh filtered through centuries. You don't move. The creature floats a few meters away,
watching you with the calm of something that has never known fear. Then, slowly, it sinks again, the surface folding over it without a trace. The scientific truth grounding this moment is that life in the ocean has its own timeline, older, steadier. While land life rose and fell in bursts of extinction and rebirth, the sea remained constant, carrying lineages through epochs of fire and ice. Some marine reptiles vanished with the Great Impact, but others left their blueprint behind. In whales, in dolphins, in the great fish that still glide through depths untouched by sunlight. The ocean forgets nothing. It only reshapes memory into motion. You walk along the shore, tracing the gentle curve of the waterline. The sand here is darker, finer, scattered with fragments of shell and bone. In one shallow pool, you see the spiral of an ammonite fossil, its ridges catching the last slant of sun. You touch it carefully, tracing the pattern with your fingertip. The shell feels cool, smooth, eternal. You realize you're holding one of evolution's favorite designs, a logarithmic spiral, efficient, endless, found in galaxies and snail shells alike. A lesser-known fact drifts into your thoughts. The ratio of that spiral, known as the golden angle, governs the arrangement of petals, seeds, even hurricanes. The universe, it seems, has a geometry of patience, repeating itself wherever conditions allow. You smile softly at the thought that beauty might just be mathematics remembering itself. The wind rises, scattering small waves across the water. Each one catches light, then fades into shadow. You notice a faint glow beneath the surface, a soft blue shimmer that moves like breath. Bioluminescent algae, perhaps, stirred by motion. You crouch and trail your hand through the shallows, and the glow intensifies, a streak of living light wrapping briefly around your fingers. The effect is ethereal, almost impossible. You are touching something alive that remembers starlight. You recall a curious discovery. Scientists once found that the luciferin molecules responsible for bioluminescence are structurally similar to compounds used in ancient plant metabolism. The same chemistry that allowed life to capture sunlight now lets it create its own. You lift your hand, dripping water that glows for a heartbeat before fading. Life, you think, has always been a master of keeping the dark from winning entirely. You walk farther along the shore, and as the light fades, more of the water begins to glow. Tiny sparks ignite across the lake, spreading outward in clusters. Soon, the entire surface shimmers like a sky reversed, each ripple a constellation, each wave a slow comet passing through reflection. You stop to watch, transfixed. The sound of gentle surf merges with the calls of distant night birds. The air grows cooler, dense with the scent of mineral water and distant rain. You sit on a smooth rock and pull your knees close, letting the breeze comb your hair. The bioluminescence pulses faintly in the corner of your vision. Blue, green, indigo. Every color feels alive, breathing. You think about everything you've seen, feathers fossilized into color, rivers that remembered continents, creatures that refused extinction by changing shape. You realize that evolution isn't a ladder, it's a light moving through darkness, leaving glows wherever it touches. What survives isn't the strongest or the fastest, it's whatever learns to stay luminous, even in shadow. A sudden splash draws your eyes back to the lake. The marine reptile surfaces again, closer this time, its silhouette backlit by the faint glow. Its head rises above the water, and for a moment it seems to look past you, toward the horizon where the stars are beginning to show. You follow its gaze. Above the dark tree line, the first constellations shimmer, bright and cold. You remember something profound and simple. The calcium in your bones and in the creature's teeth came from those very stars, forged in their final breaths billions of years ago. You are both made of the same dust, carried by the same chemistry, sculpted by the same physics that wrote the spiral into shells and galaxies alike. The reptile sinks again, vanishing without a ripple. You sit for a long time after it's gone, the bioluminescence fading gently, as if exhaling. The stars above and the glow below mirror each other perfectly, the universe folded upon itself, one reflection shimmering in the other. The air is still now. You breathe in deeply, and the scent of water fills your chest. You close your eyes, letting the rhythm of the lake lull you into stillness. The sound of small waves becomes the sound of breath. You are both shoreline and tide, observer and echo. When you open your eyes again, the night has deepened. The world around you glows faintly. Blue water, silver stars, the ghost of motion lingering on the horizon. Somewhere far away, a bird calls, its voice clear and bright, as if reminding you that the lineage of light continues still. And for the first time, you understand. Extinction is not absence. It's transformation remembered in the dark.
The night feels endless, yet it carries a quiet sense of arrival, as though you've reached the place where every path in this journey was leading. The inland sea stretches before you, silver and dark, its edges dissolving into fog. A thin crescent moon hangs above it like a blade of bone, and the reflection below completes it into a circle. Perfect symmetry, light mirrored in darkness. You breathe in deeply, the air thick with salt and coolness, and it feels like inhaling the memory of the planet itself. You walk along the shoreline where small waves kiss the rocks. Each one brings a faint glimmer, the residue of bioluminescence clinging to the foam. Every step you take sets the water glowing anew, tracing a path of light behind you. It feels like walking through the reflection of a star field, your footsteps fading slowly as the tide reclaims them. A soft wind rises, carrying the scent of open water and something older, metallic, almost cosmic. The sound it makes is low, like the whisper of distant wings. You stop and look upward. The stars above are so numerous that they blur into a pale river of light. The Milky Way arcs across the sky, and for a moment you feel small enough to fit inside it. The scientific truth grounding you here is both humbling and beautiful. Calcium in bones, iron in blood, and carbon in breath, all forged in the cores of dying stars. The universe recycles itself endlessly, and every living thing is proof of that continuity. The dinosaurs, the birds, the forests, the rivers, all of them stardust arranged into motion. You are too. Every heartbeat is an echo of a supernova. You stand quietly, letting that awareness settle. The world around you feels less like a place and more like a single living organism, everything breathing in unison. You glance at the water again. The glow beneath the surface flickers, steady, patient. The bioluminescence pulses in slow waves, as if the lake itself has a heartbeat. You remember something you once read. Even today, deep in Earth's oceans, there are creatures whose light patterns pulse in rhythm with their surroundings. Squid, plankton, jellyfish, all responding to moon phases, tides, and magnetic shifts. A planetary conversation, still ongoing, mostly unseen. You wonder if these same luminous languages were spoken here long before land dwellers learned sound. A shadow moves across the water. For a second, your heart pauses. Then you recognize the shape. Not a predator, but a school of fish just beneath the surface. Their movement stirs the glowing algae, creating ribbons of light that twist and merge into spirals. The effect is mesmerizing. You watch as each swirl collapses into the next, forming patterns that look almost deliberate. You kneel at the edge of the water and dip your hand into the glow. The cold seeps into your skin, and light pools around your fingers. Tiny plankton drift over your knuckles, their glow fading and returning as they adjust to your presence.
For a moment, you are part of the lake's slow respiration. When you pull your hand out, droplets linger on your palm like tiny stars, then vanish one by one. A lesser-known fact surfaces in your thoughts. Bioluminescent life doesn't just exist in the ocean. It thrives in caves, forests, and even within certain fungi. The same biochemical reaction, luciferin oxidizing in the presence of luciferase, occurs across species that share no ancestry. It's one of nature's great coincidences, or perhaps one of its recurring ideas. Light as language, repeated wherever the dark grows deep enough to listen. You look back toward the cliffs you came from. Their outlines are faint, softened by mist. Somewhere beyond them, the waterfall still roars quietly, feeding this lake, sustaining the light that now surrounds you. Everything connects, river to fall, fall to lake, lake to sea. The cycle continues, unchanged. You lie back on the sand, folding your arms behind your head, and watch the stars reflect on the glowing surface. The illusion is perfect. You can't tell where the sky ends and the water begins. Above you, the constellations burn cold and ancient. You trace their shapes: Orion, Cygnus, the faint curve of Scorpius. The bird-shaped constellation, you realize, mirrors the flocks you watched earlier. Even the heavens seem to echo the story of flight. You imagine early humans staring at these same constellations, naming them after animals long vanished: dragons, serpents, eagles. In their stories, the sky was alive, just as it is tonight. Maybe every myth of flight, every angel, phoenix, or thunderbird was an unconscious remembrance, a whisper from this lineage you've been tracing, the dream of dinosaurs that refuse to end. The lake is perfectly still now, its surface a mirror of galaxies. You think of something tender. Birds navigate by these same stars, using magnetic senses aligned with celestial light. Migration, that quiet miracle of instinct, is really the continuation of an ancient dialogue between sky and life. The creatures who first learned to rise on air now follow the heavens themselves, reading patterns written in starlight. The thought comforts you. It makes every direction feel like home. The breeze cools further, brushing your hair across your forehead. You close your eyes and listen to the sound of the small waves. Somewhere in that rhythm is the echo of every era, the tread of giant feet on mudflats, the first flutter of feathered wings, the beat of hearts that refuse to stop. All of it folded neatly into this moment, into this breath. You open your eyes again and watch the stars ripple faintly in the water. The night feels endless but kind. You realize that what endures isn't the body or even the species, it's the gesture. The way a creature rises, sings, reaches, breathes. Life doesn't remember form, it remembers movement. The tide brushes gently at your feet, bioluminescent water curling around your toes. You smile and whisper, "You never stopped glowing." The lake answers with light. Dawn finds you still by the water's edge, though you can't recall having fallen asleep. The horizon softens from black to blue, from blue to the pale warmth of new light. Mist drifts low across the surface of the lake, and as the sun lifts its first finger of gold above the hills, the world seems to breathe again. The bioluminescence fades with the coming brightness, its shimmer folding back into invisibility like a secret stored for the next night. You rise slowly, stretching your arms as sunlight warms your skin. The air is cool, fresh, and full of the smell of wet stone. You look to the eastern sky and catch sight of movement, shapes too large for small birds, too fluid for mere wind. As the light strengthens, you make them out clearly. Tall, elegant figures moving across the plains, feathers catching the morning glow like copper silk. You begin walking toward them. The ground between the lake and the open savanna is damp, dotted with patches of wildflowers, each heavy with dew. Their petals glint like polished glass. The sound of your steps startles small creatures, lizards, insects that scurry through the grass. You move slowly, quietly, unwilling to disturb the stillness. When you draw near, you see them clearly. Emus, modern giants, descendants of an ancient lineage that chose not to soar but to stride. They move with unhurried grace, their long legs steady, their eyes intelligent and calm. One lifts its head as you approach, tilting slightly as if measuring your intentions. You stop a few paces away, letting the space between you fill with sunlight. The scientific truth grounding you here is simple yet humbling. Though flight defines birds, its absence does not negate their heritage. Radites, emus, ostriches, kiwis are the quiet philosophers of avian evolution, carrying within them the design of both flight and endurance. Their wings, though small, still bear the signature of the skies they left behind. Each step they take is a continuation of the same journey, only on a different axis. You watch the emus graze in silence, their movements deliberate. The leader of the group steps closer to a patch of flowering shrubs, pecking gently at the leaves. Its feathers shimmer in the morning light, not bright but textured, each filament reflecting gray and brown in subtle gradients. You notice the down beneath, soft as dust, insulating warmth even in this open expanse. Evolution, you think, doesn't waste, it reassigns. A lesser-known tidbit drifts into your thoughts. Emu feathers grow in double shafts, 2 filaments from each follicle, creating a natural density that muffles sound and disperses heat. The result is near-silent movement, perfection for a creature designed to live by calm observation. You listen carefully now, realizing that even as a dozen birds move across the grass, they make almost no noise at all. It's as if the world itself respects their passage. One of them lowers its neck to drink from a shallow pool, and its reflection ripples softly. The image doubles, bird and mirror, present and past. You kneel by, watching the way its breath disturbs the water's surface, how its chest rises and falls. There's a rhythm there, familiar. You remember the cranes by the river, the hawk's gaze above the cliffs, the heron's stillness at dawn. This is the same melody, played in a lower key. The emu lifts its head, droplets rolling from its beak. For a moment, its eyes meet yours, dark, steady, unreadable. But behind that calm gaze, you sense something vast, endurance. A lineage that walked through cataclysm and silence and arrived here, not diminished, but distilled. You sit back on your heels and take in the whole scene. The emus wander through the golden grass, their feathers rippling in the light breeze. The sun climbs higher, casting long shadows that stretch like brushstrokes across the land. The air hums faintly with heat. Everything seems to move in slow rhythm, the tilt of the birds' heads, the sway of the grass, even your breathing. You think of what survival truly means, not dominance, not conquest, but adaptation through gentleness. Learning when to be still, when to shift shape, when to walk instead of fly. The dinosaurs that became birds didn't escape extinction by defiance, but by surrendering to change. You feel the lessons settle quietly in you, as natural as the warmth on your skin. A soft rustle draws your gaze sideways. A smaller bird, a wren perhaps, flits through the nearby reeds, its motion quick and curious. It hops onto a low branch, cocks its head, and begins to sing. The emus pause to listen, their long necks turning slightly toward the sound. You smile at the contrast, the tiny and the towering, both sharing the same air, both inheritors of the same ancient blood. A gust of wind rises, carrying with it a wave of warm air and the distant scent of eucalyptus. The light shifts, turning the grass silver for a heartbeat before settling back into gold. You close your eyes and listen to the sound of wings somewhere high above. For a moment, the world feels layered again, ground and sky, past and present, all coexisting in one long exhale. When you open your eyes, the emus are moving away, their long strides measured, almost meditative. You watch them recede into the distance, their shapes growing smaller until they merge with the shimmer of the horizon. The land feels quiet in their absence, but not empty. It feels fulfilled. You sit for a while longer, tracing a small spiral in the dust with your finger. The motion soothes you. Around you, the day has fully awakened. The hum of insects, the rustle of grass, the soft ticking of cooling stones under the rising heat. You realize that like the emus, you've stopped searching for what was lost. You're simply watching what remains, alive and evolutioning. The breeze shifts again, brushing your face like a whisper. It smells of water, distant and familiar, the next part of the journey calling. You stand, brushing dust from your hands, and take one last look at the plains. "Still walking," you murmur. And you begin to walk too, following the same invisible path, each step a quiet tribute to all the forms that came before.
You walk beneath a sky the color of cool porcelain, the hour between heat and hush. The land is open again, low grasses, a few scattered trees, and the light spreads evenly, without edges, like milk poured into tea. Your footsteps are soft, and the wind carries the faintest scent of resin, a whisper from forests you left behind. The world has slowed to a contemplative pace, and in that slackened rhythm, you begin to notice it, how everything you've witnessed folds back toward you, not as a mirror of shape, but of impulse. The dinosaurs learned feathers, then song, then flight. You learned questions. You pause at a shallow rise where the soil is the color of old books. Someone, wind, water, or time, has smoothed a sandstone slab clean. You sit and breathe, and the breath feels familiar. The waterfall's pulse gentled into your own chest. The river, the coast, the rain, the bioluminescent lake, all those places were rehearsals for this moment, when you turn inward and see that your lineage is not a branch apart, but a thread woven through. Your ancestors did not grow veins or hollow bones, they grew curiosity, your feather of choice, your lift, your warmth. A scientific truth settles with the lightness of a feather on water. You carry in your body the record of old experiments. The wrist bones that let you write and turn pages are modified remnants of fins and forelimbs. Your middle ear bones once served reptilian jaws. Your lungs trace back to ancient sacs that helped fish sip air when water thinned. Even your voice borrows the planet's old instruments, the larynx shaped by breath, the tongue tuned by firelight talk. You are not an exception, you are an anthology. A small movement breaks the stillness. On a nearby branch, a corvid lands, coal gloss washed with violet if the light catches just so. It hops closer, tilts its head, and plucks a twig, turning it delicately while testing the angles. With the patience you've seen in herons and the certainty you felt in emus, it tucks the twig into a crevice, levers out a beetle, and swallows. Then it looks at you in a way that feels uncomfortably mutual. Tool meets toolmaker. Feather meets question. You smile because you remember the rainforest's violinist, the mannequin that sings with its wings, and the cave's soft scrapes, the first accidental signatures. The corvid's gesture makes a quiet bridge. Intelligence doesn't follow one lane. A quirky tidbit visits gently, amused with itself. Pigeons can learn to distinguish Monet from Picasso, sorting impressionism from cubism with training that rewards a peck. Crows recognize human faces for years, passing social warnings along to offspring. Scrub jays re-hide their caches when watched, as if simulating another mind's gaze. Elsewhere in the animal choir, dolphins answer their own names. Cuttlefish resist immediate snacks for better ones later. Bees dance the coordinates of nectar in a figure-8 hymn. Your curiosity is not lone, it is kin. You look down at your hands. The lines across your palms resemble dry riverbeds, tributaries converging. In those hands, entire climates have turned to thought. Fire turned into story, stone into blade, pigment into constellation. You lift your fingers and let shadow play across the stone slab. You see it then, how your species turned murmuration into math, nesting into architecture, the syrinx's counterpoints into harmony and counterpoint scored for breath and string. Each innovation is a feather grown from need, then repurposed for beauty. Warmth became display, safety became flight, survival became art.
The air warms a fraction, a shimmer above the grass. You think of the bones in bird wings, hollowed latticework arched for lift, and of the architecture of our cities, their trusses and vaults, how bridges curve like rib and sternum over water. The feathers' barbs and barbules interlock, yours do too, zipping meaning tight enough to carry across time. Even your networks, digital or whispered, behave like flocks. Distributed attention, local rules, emergent order. As in murmuration, no maestro stands in the middle. As in murmuration, contact with a handful of neighbors is enough to turn the whole sky at once. A gentle debate glides in on the wind and rests beside you without urgency. Are you still evolving? Some say your medicine and shelter soften selection's teeth, that culture outpaces gene, that you've offloaded change into tools and stories. Others point to altitudes and diets and pathogens, to lactose tolerance and highland blood, to immune genes that still churn under unseen pressures, to brain circuits tuned by screens as surely by savannas. Perhaps the question splits along the same seam you've traced all night: feather and song. Biology keeps drafting, culture keeps composing. You advance by partnership. A shadow crosses the ground. A hawk, calm as a hand, rides a thermal higher. You crack it as it dwindles into the height where heat becomes silk. And you wonder, softly, sleepily, what your next feather might be. Is it patience again, now scaled for a crowded world? Is it listening, sharpened to the ultraviolets you never learned to see? Is it a willingness to move with your nearest seven, not in panic, but in practiced grace? Something of Section 12's dusk returns to you, the heavy scent of ozone, the hint of pending change, and your mind grazes the old impact and the Deccan fires. Those nights did come. The sky did dim. Yet the story's hinge was not the rock or the lava, but the littleness that endured. Birds small enough to huddle in leaf litter and borrow warmth. Seeds tucked in soil, waiting for sun. Scavengers clever enough to make do. You look at your hands again. They are big enough for tools, small enough for care. Perhaps that is your trick, to cradle when the sky goes dim, to carry embers through the dark, to remember the way back to blue. Another fact joins quietly, carrying no banners, only steadiness. The FOXP2 gene, once headlined as a language gene, is older than your voice and sings in birdsong too, guiding motor learning, shaping sequence. When a young zebra finch practices his father's tune, neurons fire in patterns that echo a human child finding syllables. There is no single font of speech. There is a habit of rehearsal. It began long before words. It will likely continue after them. A breeze turns the grass into a low sea. You consider the amber you held, the way it stored a wing like a candle's flame paused mid-flicker, and the fossil wall that kept seasons as rings. You think of your own archives, clay tablet, codex, server rack, and feel the kinship with resin and quartz. Each is a climate for memory, each with its own weathering. The amber cradled a moment. The lake kept a night of stars. Your pages hold a voice. None last forever. None need to. Continuity is not permanence, it is renewal. The corvid hops closer again, studies the glinting pebble by your knee, and chooses not to take it. Choice, a quiet kind of lift. You remember the cassowary's boom in Section 13, the way the sound moved your ribs from the outside in. You remember the ostrich's spirals in dust, art that vanished almost as soon as it arrived. You remember bioluminescence pulsing like a lake's heartbeat, light writing itself on dark water. You carry all of it now, soft as down, strong as quill. A final question, almost too gentle to be named, arrives like a feather landing on your wrist. Can curiosity be a habitat wide enough for the world? Can you make room inside it for things that do not answer you? Volcano, whale, glacier, fern, without needing to own them. The debate stays open, not as anxiety, but as invitation. You do not have to close the book to sleep. You can leave it open to the page where the feather rests. You rise. The grass leans and rights itself. Far off, a line of small birds lifts, turns, and stitches the horizon with thread you cannot see. You feel the lift in your chest, the old air sac rumor running through your mammal lungs, and you laugh, quietly, kindly, at the borrowed anatomy of hope. You begin walking. Your shadow glides beside you like a ground-bound bird. The wind smooths the stone behind, and in front of you, the light opens, patient as a wing that has learned, through 1,000 practiced mornings, exactly how to hold you up.
By late afternoon, the light mellows into a soft brass, and the plain narrows into a corridor of low hills that guide you toward a river you somehow already know. The same silver thread you have met again and again, older than plate boundaries, patient as breath. You walk beside it without hurry. Cottony seeds drift from reeds and catch in your hair. Their pale filaments look like miniature feathers, a reminder that even plants learned, in their own way, how to ride the air. The wind is easy, the insects are quiet, and the ground at your feet records your passing with shallow, soon-to-vanish prints. It feels right that the land keeps you only briefly. This whole journey has been about what moves on. Where the river swings wide, you find a low bank of silt hardened by sun into a page of clay. You kneel, expecting the usual signatures: three-toed tracks, a wing drag, the crescent of a tail tip, and they are there. But among them lies something almost delicate. A scatter of hollow bones light as thistles, a sternum with the faint suggestion of a keel, and a fused fork where two slender struts meet in a wish. You touch the little wishbone, furcula, and marvel that a shape you've seen on holiday tables and in children's games is also an engineering brace, springing and recoiling with every wing beat to store elastic energy. The scientific truth settles calmly. Birds are not merely descendants of dinosaurs, they are dinosaurs, still wearing the air sacs, the hollowed latticework, the furcula, the egg and shell, and parental attention first rehearsed under stranger skies. A shadow passes. You look up. A falcon crosses the sun and becomes a dark vowel stitched into light. When it vanishes, the river sounds louder, as if it has advanced a few centuries in your brief distraction. You think about everything these bodies carried forward. Bones that learned to breathe, feathers that learned to insulate, then display, then lift, voices that learned to sequence notes the way running water sequences stones. And quietly, another lineage, minds that learned to practice, to test, to revise. In the rainforest, you heard the syrinx find harmony. On the savanna, you watched feet write spirals into dust. By the lake, you saw light become a living alphabet. All of it is here, in the bones and the water's patient grammar. A small, present-day truth arrives with the simplicity of a pebble. In 2005, paleontologists found medullary bone inside a T-Rex femur, temporary, calcium-rich tissue modern birds build in their limbs to supply eggshells during laying. You sit back at that, smiling at the tenderness of the detail. The Thunder King carried a nursery in her marrow. The line between Titan and Sparrow is not drama, it is care. You follow the river downstream as the hills flatten into a floodplain that feels almost modern. The color of the air changes. The gold cools toward pewter, and the breeze begins to smell faintly of distant rain, mixed with smoke and something metallic you can't name. On a sandbar, a congregation of waders stands ankle-deep, each bird a soft parenthesis of neck and leg. You pause, listening to their soft clucks, their throat clears, their low murmur that seems more about keeping time together than about news. You think of murmuration rules, how each body's small attention to a handful of neighbors yields a chorus without rehearsal. You think of cities, of crosswalks, of data networks and candlelight vigils, of how your own species learned the same trick in asphalt and code. Look left, look right, respond gently, keep moving as one. A quirky, glinting tidbit peeks through your thoughts. In controlled experiments, when specific dormant genes are reawakened in chicken embryos, tooth buds begin to form along the jaw, atavistic echoes of their theropod past. The teeth never erupt, the chick never hatches that way, the work is done humanely and remains in lab journals, but the whisper is audible. The archive is inside the living.
What looks like disappearance may simply be a library going quiet between readers. Dusk settles. You enter a stand of trees that thins into a river town. Lamplight, a footbridge, the hum of tires on far pavement, the civilized hush of people lowering their voices because the evening has arrived. Swifts arc under the bridge in scissor silhouettes, taking insects you cannot see. Pigeons crown a cornice, iridescence lit like gasoline rainbows in the last light. A pair of night herons stand at the culvert's mouth, still as punctuation marks, waiting for the river to give up its commas. You slow automatically, as if entering a temple. The scientific fact here is mundane and holy at once. The urban air column is as ecological as any forest. Thermals off masonry, roosts and rafters, artificial constellations timed to migration. Some birds calibrate their compasses against the city's glow. Some sing earlier, louder in masks of traffic noise. Some nest in letters and girders and the quiet hearts of stadium roofs. The ancient conversation continues. It's just speaking through brick. You lean against the railing and look down. Beneath you, carp turn in bronze loops. Above you, bats stitch the sky shut with invisible thread. Somewhere a train passes, its low note joining the river until you can't tell machine from water. You think of the Fox P2 commonality you carried from Section 29, of birds and children practicing, of song as a motor habit, not merely a poem. You think of medullary bone and of wishbones and of the little claws that Hoatzin chicks still wear when they climb, of countershading and super black velvet and Pacifico-flovens and Turrico-verdin, of the plate-like melanosomes in Kaihong that turned a head into a morning. The catalog is long, but the story is short. Nothing ended. And still the open question arrives, as gently as a feather landing on your sleeve. What does it mean for a lineage to persist, not just biologically, but meaningfully? Is continuity enough if the forests thin, the nights brighten, the migratory highways fragment into a lattice of bright distractions? Can your species practice a murmuration of care at the scale required? Each of you turning with your nearest seven towards quieter lights, cooler roofs, safer flyways, so that the oldest songs can keep slipping through the dusk? The answer does not insist. It waits in your breath and in the lamplit wings around you and in the river's slow city-bent curve. A breeze lifts and cools your face. Somewhere above the bridge, a kestrel kites in place, its head steady while the body trembles. A mastery of stillness that is not the absence of motion, but motion exactly countered. You feel the metaphor land. Perhaps your next feather is balance. Perhaps the art is to tune your tremble to the weather of the world until you hover over what matters. The first drops of rain arrive, wide and warm, pocking the river into coins. A swallow takes one last skim and vanishes into the bridge's ribs. You turn for shelter and catch your reflection in a storefront pane. For an instant, you see two selves, one scattered through Triassic dawns and Jurassic canopies and Cretaceous tides, the other standing on a modern street with damp hair and a pocket full of feathers that are more idea than artifact. Both are true. You lift a hand in a small private salute to the glass, and the glass salutes back. Above the awning, a pigeon shakes itself, throws off rain, and the throat patch flares green, then purple, then dusk. You laugh softly because you know how it does that, and because knowing has not even slightly reduced the wonder. The rain steadies. The river deepens its note. Somewhere behind you, a child points up and says, "Look," and everybody looks. And 100 million years step forward on light bones, hollowed breath, and a wishbone that once flexed under thunder, and keep going. Now you let everything slow, slower than river, slower than wing. Breathe in through your nose until your ribs widen like a calm tide against a beach, and out through your mouth in a long ribbon of air. And as you do, you picture the feather you've been carrying, not in your hand anymore, but along the inside of your thoughts. A soft vein smoothing the day's edges, drawing them into a single quiet line that points toward sleep. You rest your eyes on one easy image, starlight kneeling at the rim of a lake while bioluminescence answers from below. Sky and water exchanging small blue promises, the world agreeing to be gentle for a while.
You remember how the heron waited without strain, how the emus walked without hurry, how the murmuration turned as one without chatter or concern. And you let those movements settle into your breath. Long inhales that gather, longer exhales that release, as if you are making room in your chest for a larger, older rhythm to move in and make itself at home. If your mind offers you small questions, you let them perch, and if they feel the need to sing, you let them finish their song. And when they fly on, you do not follow, because the branch you are on is comfortable, and the air tonight is kind, and the darkness is not a door closing, but a wing opening, wide and steady. You are safe to drift. You are safe to dim with the lamps and brighten with the first pale edge of morning. Somewhere beyond your window, a pigeon will flare green, then purple, then gray, and you will know without needing to think that the story never stopped. It simply learned to whisper. Breathe once more, and once more after that. The river keeps time. The planet hums. You sleep.